and spent some time on that before seeking to make final decisions about this trail. So one of the things that is not in this plan is a recommendation about the surface to go on the piece of the railroad grade that's depicted in the middle photograph that's on our cover sheet, the upper section of the old railroad grade. That photograph was taken from the approximate location of Stein Park today, but it was back from the late 1800s when there was still a train running up and down. Lindsay will take you through what is in the plan, but before she gets started, I just thought we'd talk a little bit about the history of how this property came to be owned by Pitkin County. Before 1968, this entire reach of canyon was all private, with a railroad right away through it, and it's been an interesting assemblage over the time since, where today, except for a couple of inholdings, this entire canyon is owned by public agencies, primarily by Pitkin County, but with one key piece, Henry Stein Park, owned by Aspen Valley Land Trust and managed by the city of Aspen. We've got a timeline that shows you the chronology of when these properties were conveyed to the county, really starting with the Aspen branch of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, and its right-of-way conveyed to the county back in 1969, and following that was a series of conveyances by Henry Stein. In one way, I think we ought to name this plan for him, or at least make it in his honor, because his name shows up many times when you start digging into the history of this gorge. But with Stein Park, apparently Henry and was it Mr. Pepke? Oh no, Fritz Benedict. I'm sorry. Henry Stein and Fritz Benedict got together and asked that the Aspen Parks Association be created back in the late 60s, and they did that. And the very first piece of property given to the Aspen Parks Association was Stein Park, at that time called Freddie Fisherman's Park. The Aspen Parks Association has now been renamed the Aspen Valley Land Trust and is the oldest land trust in Colorado. So a lot of history got started right there in the mouth of this gorge. I won't go individually through all the other subsequent land conveyances, but it does stand out that unlike Sky Mountain Park, where the Open Space Department really program got in and did a lot of heavy lifting to pull it together, this one really came together more just by the availability of the county as a recipient for this series of gifts. There's one open space purchase in the middle of here when the airport ranch was purchased to lengthen the runway, and open space dollars were utilized to pay for the portion of the old Pepke property that was down in the gorge. Incidentally, it's the only time open space dollars have ever been used in a condemnation proceeding, and that came about because the Pepkes requested that the county acquire that property through the condemnation proceeding, which has some tax advantages. But there's a little bit of open space trivia for you. And over the years, almost the entirety of this gorge has been conveyed to the county. We had a good time looking into the history of it, and from a use point of view, some of the old photographs of the railroad down in there are interesting. The Denver and Rio Grande built that grade through there in lightning speed in 1887, and they were racing with the Midland at the time. There's a wonderful book called The Road to Riches, which is a historical fiction, but it's based on a lot of the facts of that race between the two railroads. And they'd go out at night and sabotage each other's construction from the day before. And there was a lot at stake trying to be the first one into Aspen, but it'd be interesting to see what they were doing in that gorge, trying to blow through there as fast as they possibly could. And it's amazing how well that grade has stood the test of time, with the exception of the shale bluffs area, which of course requires a lot of maintenance, and to this day. Jim Markalunas, in his memoirs, has a description of riding the train through the gorge, and we included that in the history section. So we plan to continue to interview people and find oral histories and revive as much of this memory as we possibly can. David Stapleton spent some time with Janet recently recounting his memories of coming into Aspen on the old wagon road that also came up through the gorge. When the two railroads were running, the only way to get to Aspen on something other than a train was in a road that came through Jaffe Park and went up the gully, the bottom of the gorge, and crossed on a bridge that's down below the Sardi's house. The abutments are still there, but there's still a few people around that can remember bumping in and out of Aspen on that route, although it's little known today. So we're going to continue to explore all of that history and hopefully expand this history section over time. We couldn't resist including a photograph of something a little more recent, although this is over 40 years ago when Henry Dutchendorf, a.k.a. John Denver, went out and had his picture taken at Slaughterhouse Falls to be on the cover of what became his breakaway album, and the hit song is now one of our state songs. So we sent Ranger Moe out there to reenact that recently in the same place. But, certainly there's a lot of memory and a lot of significance in that gorge. Sites like this are of national park quality, and so what Lindsay and Gary and the team have been working on is really intended to capture just how significant of a place this is, and come up with a set of action items that will enhance this place for all of its various dimensions.
Okay. So just to kind of orient everyone and highlight all the different properties and easements that go into this plan. This is Aspen in the lower right. This would be Woody Creek heading down valley in the upper left. McLean Flats, ABC area, and then Sky Mountain Park area over here. So right now there's 6 open space properties that have no management plan, 2 open space properties that have a management plan, the most recent being Gold Butte. So starting from the top of the map, we have Mills Open Space, which is kind of between the Intercept lot and the river. Jaffe Park, which has a management plan that was incorporated as part of this. We looked at the details in that. There is a fishing easement to connect the Mills Open Space to the Airport Ranch Open Space. The fishing easement's from Aspen Consolidated. The Denver Rio Grande corridor runs through the whole 4 miles of the planning area, which is owned by Pickens County. Then there's the Moore Open Space, the Moore Property Fishing Easement, which connects the gap that's in between the Airport Ranch Open Space. Those 2 fishing easements allow the whole 4-mile stretch to be legally fishable. Then there's the Rio Grande Trail, which we highlighted because it's a major asset going through the gorge. Airport Ranch, the pink throughout the about 2 miles in the middle. There's the Holy Cross Trail easement, which makes the Stein Trail possible. So the Stein Trail coming out of the back of the ABC down across the Stein Bridge and up to the Rio Grande. There's a small parcel down there, the Stein Riverside Park. Then there's 2 conservation easements over the top of Red Butte Ranch Open Space, as well as the Deer Hill area. The first one's Deer Hill Park Trust Conservation Easement, and then there's the Red Butte Ranch conservation easement. There's Stein Park, which we're all very familiar with. That's at the intersection of Cemetery Lane and the Rio Grande Trail. And then the Red Butte Ranch open space is the large green property. Gold Butte is also in this area, although Gold Butte's management plan was just recently adopted. This whole planning process has been involved. Every member of the open space staff as well as city staff has been very involved because Stein Park, Mills Open Space, the Aspen Mast Trail, which connects out of Jaffe Park, there's a few properties in there that are city either jointly managed or city managed. So we started this process doing the inventory and then public outreach to understand how the public currently uses these properties and how they want to use them in the future. We had 8 different open houses focused on different user groups specific to the area. The goal was to try to have one-on-one time with each of the user groups so that staff could understand their different needs. The Appendix B of the report has maps that look like this, as well as all the other public comment we received. And so these maps are the comments from the open houses where the public came and drew what they wanted to see or how they currently use the properties, and then we had them all put onto one map. On July 4th, staff also had a booth out in the project area in Stein Park to solicit feedback that way. We've had a website up and continue to have our project website up, which is pitkinostprojects.com. And this project, as well as any of the ongoing open space projects, are all on this website. And so for this project, you can download the plan. There's a comment form. You can fill out comments directly back. There's also the upcoming process is on there. So there's many ways to that people have been encouraged to provide comment and feedback, as well as continue to encourage them through the process. The goal is that we're just kicking off 2 more months of public comment. We've planned 3 open houses and 2 different bike tours. And the goal is to have all the comments gathered back in again by November 6th so we can update the plan and bring it back at the next joint meeting, which is in December. So we started out going through all of the existing conditions in there, and there's a lot of information in the report as well as in the different appendices. So I'm going to give you a kind of the brief synopsis, but if you have questions, let me know. The first thing we did was looked at all the existing plans that incorporate a portion of this area. There's 10 different plans and 2 different pertinent codes. And so the goal is we need to understand all the different planning and policies that are currently out there and how that would inform and impact anything we want to do in the future. We looked at the geology and hydrology, both of which are very active in this area, which also is, it makes it cool, makes it interesting. The geology is very interesting. It has the I think it's called the Castle Creek Fault Zone runs through here, and that's what makes Red Butte, you can kind of tell in this picture the striations. The Red Butte's actually uplifted and turned, and that's what makes the geology kind of shift in this area and start exposing some of the shale. The Roaring Fork River cuts through all of it, and the Maroon Creek as well as Owl Creek feed into it. Then we have very active seeps on the hillsides coming down from McLean Flats area, including the waterfall that runs year-round. Along with all that, the reason that it's very active and beautiful, that does come with it some maintenance, or you have to deal with how active the geology is in this area. There are areas of rockfall and mudslides with different weather patterns that come through. I just like this picture because it's a glacial erratic that was left. It's sitting on the very top of Gold Butte. If you're out there, you can see the giant round boulder that was left behind from a glacier. So the geology and hydrology in this area is very active, very interesting. So Gary's going to tell you about vegetation and wildlife.
So vegetation and wildlife, we've owned these properties for a long period of time, and so back in 2006, in 2005 and 6, we started to look at the overall gorge, and that's where we kind of came up with the name for the Roaring Fork Gorge all the way through. And so at that time, we did a vegetation survey, and staff did a wildlife survey of the property. And, looking through it again this year, we went back out. Not much has changed significantly in this area. Some of the highlights of the vegetation is we have a pretty significant wetland area right here. And this wetland area is, anyone who fishes down there or anything can see it, and it's pretty significant. It's right on the river. It's beautiful. It's, in pretty good shape. Yes, it does have some cattails and some other things that might not be there, but, one of the things when the Natural Heritage Program started to look at our upper valley for areas of potential conservation, this area in the Roaring Fork Gorge was listed as one that should be protected. And so that was a pretty significant thing. The greatest thing is the county did that by, over time protecting this entire gorge. So, the wildlife use in this area, there's a wildlife underpass at the airport, and that wildlife underpass provides very good access between, Sky Mountain Park, which is over here, and then McLean Flats, and all the way up to, Wheatley Gulch and Kobe Park and other areas up by Lanedo. And so it provides a great corridor to the river, and then the river has a great corridor, and then through the land use code and conservation easements and everything else, they make their way through. You see a lot of them at Aspen Valley Ranch, but they're also up to Woody Creek and Lanedo. And so that's a pretty important corridor to maintain through that area. And fishing, obviously, it's a gold medal stream. It's, a lot of people don't necessarily like us telling about how good the fishing is in here because it's, it is pretty steep to get down here, and, it does get pretty heavy use, but not compared to other sections of the river. And so, but it is pretty to fish down there, and the fishing habitat that we've seen, the Division of Colorado Parks and Wildlife has, definitely, listed this area as an area to protect. And what we're going to do, what we put in one of our action items that you'll see later, that will go more in depth than the kind of preliminary view we've done of the vegetation and wildlife, is to do more of a river conservation and access plan, to really look at the resources we have, to work with the organizations like Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the Natural Heritage Program and everybody else, to come up with a overall how we're going to do conservation in this area, how we're going to provide access in this area, work with the angling community, and work with also the community that, there's a pretty big use coming out of Jaffe Park that likes to use that riparian corridor. It's really pretty down there. If you've never gone, I would definitely recommend you going down there. There's a nice little loop that's, you can go from the Rio Grande Trail down to the gorge. And then, obviously, there is that old stagecoach road that was down there. And that old stagecoach road is one of those where we will, in this river conservation and access plan, look at and say, hey, are there pieces where we can recreate this? Is this great fishing access? That will be determined in that plan too. So we'll look at all of that in the future. But, if people look at that gorge, you can't see it so well from the highway, but if you get down there, you kind of see how amazing it is down in that gorge, vegetation, wildlife.
The next thing we looked at was recreation use, which is it's clearly a very popular destination for recreation, and it has a long history ever since 1969 with having a trail in the bottom and boating and fishing. The Appendix C in the report has existing conditions all mapped out, and it kind of highlights all the different amenities that facilitate the recreation down there. But boating, just to kind of go through things quickly, boating has two major access points, which would be Stein Park and Jaffe Park. We see, traditional rafting, kayaking earlier in the year. We're starting to see the tubing continue throughout the summer, and then in tubers' cases, they can crawl out along the banks wherever they want to end their trip or when they want to go around an obstacle. Like Gary was just talking about, fishing, angling down there is very popular. Especially in the lower 2-mile stretch. A lot of anglers access from Jaffe Park. There's fairly easy fishing access from Jaffe Park. We also see a lot of fishermen and anglers parking up along Highway 82 or in the parking lot at the Aspen Animal Shelter, where there are 2 fishermen spots allocated. The access off of that side is much more difficult. We see a lot of braided trails from the fishing access coming down off that side. And then Stein Park is also another fishing access point. The Rio Grande Trail is clearly the most popular and heavily used recreation asset in the gorge area. Our use numbers, just to kind of give you ideas, that in the peak summer months we'll see a little over 15,000 users a month. In the winter we'll see, in the peak winter months, we'll see a little under 1,000 users a month. In the summer, the most popular hours are around noon, where we'll see about 75 users going by during the peak summer months. And that's about 500 to 600 users a day in peak summer months. The most popular day this summer for us was around 1,000 users, and that was on July 5th. And not that I'm aware of, there was no actual special event that day. That would have been all public use, general use. We did put out a camera this summer to try to get a breakdown of what different types of users we're seeing out there. The largest, the big purple chunk, the most we see are bikers, fatter, wider tires. We didn't go in and break out how many of those would be like rental bikes, but biking is over half the use. The skinny tires were broken out into a separate pie slice. And then walking, hiking, running, dog walking are about a third. The little orange slice was boaters. There, I guess, would be statistically, it's not, it rounds down, but we'll see, as the summer progresses, we'll start to see people portaging, or I guess carrying their rafts down the trail a little ways and then getting into the water depending on where the flow would allow them to enter. Trying to think what else. Appendix F of the report has all sorts of charts and graphs that kind of break down our use numbers in that area. I guess the most important thing is just it's good for us to understand when we see the heaviest use. That helps inform when we would want to hold or permit special events to occur, things like that. It's also, it's just good for us to understand, I suppose, when it comes to maintaining the facilities. I guess the last 2 things on here, Stein Trail, which is currently being rebuilt a little bit with some construction that's going on with the ABC, and then climbing, ice climbing, which are mainly covered in the Gold Butte report. We do see, or the Gold Butte management plan, we do see ice climbing, which happens right on the Rio and the waterfall, which is in this plan. So just this kind of goes over the adjacent uses as well as the regional trail connections. I guess it's one thing, we're right next, this 4-mile stretch is right next to Aspen. It's also the major trail connection heading down valley to the down valley communities. It's also, if you were to head to Snowmass Village and take the trails to get into Aspen, it's one of the main routes, probably the second main route, is coming down Brush Creek, connecting Aspen, Mass to Jaffe, and then on into the Rio. It also connects into to Sky Mountain Park area and all the trail connections going on in there. I guess on this map would be like the southwest corner is the airport and the ABC area, and that the ABC area with Burlingame and the North 40 is becoming a fairly dense population center within the county, and it's right on one edge of this planning area. McLean Flats is very popular equestrian estates kind of area where they'll have connections coming off their properties down onto the Rio to access the Rio that way. So it's kind of this hub where a lot of different population centers and trail connections can kind of connect through in our valley. We went through and looked at all of the amenities, the signages, the memorials, and again, those are all on the maps in the appendix. But there's just a lot going on down in there. Parking, we did hear a lot of comments about parking, which I'll go on about later. But right now, parking is the major access to this area is Stein Park and Jaffe Park, and it's not uncommon all summer long for Stein Park to be overflowing and people to be parking out on the county road. At bare minimum, it's full all day, let alone overflowing up and down the county road. Jaffe Park right now is very popular for fishing. If you're going to go fish in the bottom, you'll park at Jaffe Park, but it doesn't have trailer parking. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is ADA accessibility. Stein Park does have one ADA designated spot. It wouldn't allow for a van, it wouldn't allow for, you would have to have assisted help, the ADA user would have to have help getting in and out of their vehicle. It doesn't provide for independent use. And then Jaffe Park doesn't have any ADA parking currently. The other thing that we wanted to look at were points of interest in the gorge, mainly because we see these spots where the public congregates, and that just informed how we design and plan for the future. So we highlighted major areas where the people are congregating currently, such as the waterfall, watching boaters going over Slaughterhouse Falls. There's the pond in the gorge, and then Gold Butte coming online. We're already seeing users of the trail stopping and watching the activity at Gold Butte. The report does cover the commercial use and the special events in the gorge. Right now, commercial use, we only have 2 permitted user types, which would be boaters and then the climbing community. Currently, the anglers we don't require them to have a permit to use the area. And then special events, currently there's a study going on looking at that with community development and open space and trail staff. But it just continues to be a high demand area for special events, and so it's just something to keep in mind. We went through and looked at the opportunities, constraints, and existing issues, as well as the public comments, and tried to pull out the different themes we were hearing and seeing. Divided those, I think they're in 3 or 4 different segments. The first being property ownership. We kept seeing over and over again in the open houses, the public drawing will have you either currently use this area or want to use this area, and many times it was trespassing, it was going across private property. So, I mean, the good thing is we have 400 acres and we can put together a great comprehensive plan. But there are private inholdings and gaps in there, and the public, just to kind of summarize some of their comments, is that they do highlight these areas as areas that we should either look at acquiring or that we would maybe want to look at getting a recreation easement. It would also help us fill the gaps and do one complete resource plan for this area as well. So yeah, again, looking at natural resources, the diversity is interesting and varied, and it creates great habitat for both the wildlife and as well as the public to come visit. We do have the 400 acres of contiguous property, so it does provide the great opportunity for us to have a natural resource plan that covers a comprehensive area. There are railroad scars and different man-made impacts in there that have there's been no attempt to restore them, so there'd be a great opportunity to go in and restore properly. As well as the Highway 82 underpass connecting to Sky Mountain Park, then connects us to a whole nother large wildlife area, which of course goes to the National Forest and beyond. The public did highlight there are a few areas, this is kind of what this image is showing, there's many areas, I shouldn't say a few, of where there's user-created trails going down to the river. So, I mean, the pro is river access, the con is we're disturbing quite a bit of habitat down in there, and so there's different opportunities to look at that and restore certain areas and create sustainable access in other areas. So yeah, I mean, just kind of go through some of the public comment. The natural resources, I would say, were the #1 reason why people love this area. When you ask people what they love about the gorge, they're listing scenic beauty, the wildlife, the water, the geology, all of the amazing things in there. So it's pretty incredible that way. There were a lot of concerns about expansion of recreation. So what would that do to all the natural resources out there? There's a lot of discussion about having new trails in the river bottom versus preserving or doing enhancement and restoration in the river bottom. There's also different discussion about if you were to do new facilities, new expansion of the Rio Grande, or connections across the gorge, the different ways that could be done, if you would be impacting or if you'd be enhancing the natural resources in there. A lot of people, we did hear quite a few comments about wanting to have a more comprehensive look and study of the natural resources. And yeah, there's many opportunities for that, for restoration. So then recreational use, parking, amenities, and commercial use, which we had open houses to reach out to recreational use, so we did receive a ton of comments on the recreational use side of it. So to kind of pull out some of the themes of what we heard and what we were seeing, the different opportunities that are out there. We do own quite a bit of property in there, so we can look at different ways to expand the trails to handle the use, as well as the parking areas and the different trailhead kind of areas like Jaffe Park or Stein Park. The 2 miles going into town are very geologically constrained in there, so if we were to expand the trail at all in there, it would require different structures to make that happen. The parking areas are currently full or overflowing, and we received a ton of comments on Jaffe Park and Stein Park in general about the different amenities that could occur there, such as improving the restrooms or having ADA accessible restrooms, adding ADA parking, adding equestrian or trailer parking, expanding the parking, because right now they're overflowing and they're not accommodating all the demand. Trying to think what else, we have many slides on that one. The different comments we heard back on the Rio, which of course we spent last year looking at the Rio, so this year we received a lot of comments again on that. And again, I would say the public is very split on the upper 2 miles. I would say that on the lower 2 miles, it seems like as long as we could provide a hard and soft surface, that the public was in general kind of okay with that area changing. The upper 2 miles continues to be two very different camps on like how that should be dealt with. What else? What are we missing? We received a lot of comments on regional trail connections, because right now what we have is very steep, or the surfaces are eroding, so it really limits the user type or the different ability of users that can use those trail connections. So looking at Stein Trail Connection or Jaffe Park, those different areas we received a lot of feedback on. If you look at the comments in the back of the plan, the maps, there were trails everywhere. We got a lot of comment on the different kinds and the new kinds of trails that different user types would like to see out there in the 400 acres. I would say from the Nordic users, we received back, they would like to see better connections from like the intercept lot or to the ABC area. It seemed like most Nordic users did not want the Rio paved, but there was comments about if the paving were to happen, it would be better for roller skiing and help and facilitate their use that way. There was a lot of concern about being able to keep snow out there if it were to become paved. Just trying to get through here. We got a lot of different requests for water in Stein Park. In general, I think a lot of people go to Stein Park and maybe to like the waterfall and back into town, so they're really the upper 2 miles up there see a lot of use, and so people felt maybe that Stein Park itself could become more of a trailhead kind of area and have better facilities to facilitate that. We had a good conversation with some of the fishing guides. They were actually in favor of having some sort of permitting system out there because right now they are seeing a lot of use from outside the valley, as well as the continued more and more use down in the bottom of the gorge, which impacts their experience of their clients. Trying to think what else. They didn't necessarily want us to make access easier, I'll say that. And then the boaters, I guess we learned really an interesting thing was that historically they could set up a kayak slalom course in there, and they would train out there in the slalom course. They would like to see that ability preserved in the future. Another thing was that at some point when there was construction going on with Stein Park and the bridge over the river, the Cemetery Lane Bridge, the course of the river was changed, material was added into the river, and so it made it difficult for them to launch later in the season. So they were requesting that if we were to look at all the river improvements and Stein Park improvement, that there could be potential to look at what we would do in the river there to extend their launch season out of the park. Instead of, right now, they carry the boat down the Rio and launch a little bit further down. So, after all the public discussion and inventory and all the different comments we got back, we created action items to start addressing what we were hearing. This first slide is just kind of, I want to put it up first so that, although it's difficult to read currently, it's in the plan, that what we're outlining, a lot of elements build on something that happens previously. So when we're going through the plan, it's not like, oh, this will happen all at once, and all the decisions aren't going to be made now, but different decisions could be made in the future based upon improvements that we're proposing. So the property ownership management action, It's ongoing. It continues to be ongoing. Open Space and Trails, part of our mission is to look at acquiring properties for different reasons. We're not highlighting specific properties to target, but if that opportunity arises, we want to continue to pursue looking at what we can acquire as far as the gaps, either that or a trail easement, fishing easement, things of that nature. Then we had 2 natural resource management actions. The first being updating and expanding the natural resource information we have with the wildlife and vegetation. Like Gary had mentioned, we have some studies that they aren't covering the whole gorge area, and there's also a few updates that could be made. So for 2014, we're proposing that we do wildlife and vegetation update, and then that could feed into a river conservation plan in 2015. The idea being that river conservation plan could take the information out of the wildlife and vegetation studies to look at what we can do for restoration, areas of protection, and then look at what we can do as far as the river access in the bottom down there in concert with all that. So looking at the either new routes, restoration of old routes, and looking at the different ways that the trail portion of all that, the access portion, the fishing access portion of that can fit with the restoration rehabilitation. We split the Rio Grande Trail action item out into 2 phases. We're proposing phase 1 would be something we could do next summer, and that would be the lower 2 portion, the lower 2 miles, the portion of the Rio that goes across the Sage Flats. We're proposing that we could do that. We could have a hard and a soft surface, looking at the potential of areas where there could be a single track route as well. There's already a lot of single track that occurs off of that section of trail. The idea being that we can go in there, this section of trail, the Rio, was a section that it seemed like most of the community was okay with it changing and becoming a dual surface trail alignment. What we propose is that we could do that next summer and then look at how this section is working, phase 1 is working, and then look at how to move forward with the phase 2 of the Rio Grande. Phase 2 being Shale Bluffs into Aspen. In this plan, we propose 2 different ways that could be done. We're not looking for a decision on it right now. The first alternative being having the enhanced soft surface crusher fines, we're making repairs where necessary, that we would incorporate a hardening agent with that and an increased maintenance schedule. The option 2 for that is a 10-foot minimum asphalt surface to fit within the existing trail platform. So we're not proposing, except for in the Shale Bluff area, we're not proposing major structures to make that asphalt surface happen. In the Shale Bluffs, we would need that we would need structures in there and a railing in there. About 30%, a little over 30% of that trail, so phase 2, about 30% of that would be wide enough to accommodate a soft surface as well. Stein Park improvements and Jaffe Park improvements. We got a lot of feedback about these 2 areas because they are the 2 major access points for the gorge. We're proposing that in 2015 we look at Jaffe Park. Major comments we got back on Jaffe were just the parking, so parking and restrooms. So looking at how we can improve the parking and provide for trailer parking, ADA parking, ADA accessible restroom, as well as maybe an ADA accessible fishing access. And then with the city in 2016, look at Stein Park. Stein Park right now is extremely heavily used, and so the parking was probably the #1 comment we got about Stein Park. So the idea being that in 2016 we could look at a kind of a replanning of that whole area, looking at how we can expand the parking or reorganize the parking to make it more efficient, have better sight lines to and from the parking. We do propose that it includes looking at the impacts to the county road there, as well as on the opposite side of the county road from Stein Park, the potential for expansion of parking there. We do also propose that it looks at the right adjacent down valley from Stein Park and to the vegetation there, there's a lot of impacts and use. So looking at that area as part of the park as well. We want to look at different ways we could get ADA accessible parking in there, an ADA accessible restroom, the potentials for a water bottle station, just in general, all of the ways that that park needs to be improved to accommodate the different types of use and the amount of use that it receives. We split regional trail connections into near-term and then long-term trail connections. The trail connections, the regional trail connections was, again, a #1 comment we received about improving them. There were some near-term things we could do to improve regional trail connections, and then after that we could look at long-term in the future, much more expensive ways to make the connection happen. So the near-term, next year, there's 3 different projects that are within the Stein Trail area connecting Burlingame, ABC area to the Rio Grande Trail. One's currently going on and will be ongoing, and that's the Stein Trail improvements, and that one is with, so if this is the gorge area, here's ABC area, Burlingame. Stein Trail improvements, which is part of a public works project where we're also taking that opportunity to realign the Stein Trail and create an easier grade down to the river bottom. Next year, the City of Aspen staff is proposing a Burlingame connection study, and the idea being that we would work with them and look at how Burlingame, which is over here, how Burlingame could get a better connection to the Rio Grande Trail. And then the other thing is the Stein Bridge and trail repairs. The Stein Bridge abutments are due for improvement. We need to replace them, and the opportunity we can take to raise the bridge a little bit to promote or to provide for high water boating. And also we can look at the connection between the bridge and the Rio Grande Trail and improve that connection while we're out there. So we're proposing that for summer of 2014. The other 2 near-term regional trail connections are the Jaffe Connector and the Aspen Mass Soft Surface Trail. Jaffe Connector, right here, connects the Rio Grande Trail to Jaffe Park. It's currently it's a crusher fines trail. We're proposing in 2014 that could be in conjunction with Rio Grande Trail Phase 1. We could do a dual surface trail on there and look at places where we can lessen the grade a little bit, as well as the potential for single track alignment there as well. Right now the Jaffe Connector, the Jaffe Park trailhead area is used by equestrians. They come up the Jaffe Connector. Right now we're hearing that it limits out those people who like the hard surface that are coming off of Brush Creek and Aspen, Mass. We're not providing that connection back up to the Rio through there. As well as this just continues to become a more and more popular trailhead to access the Rio. The last one in that area is Aspen Mass Soft Surface Trail, and the City of Aspen's been working with the equestrian community about the potential of having a soft surface trail. If you're familiar with Aspen Mass Trail, it's currently only hard surface, and there's a segment that's extremely steep, making it very difficult to ride on a bike, let alone with a horse with horseshoes on. So, and then Cozy Point's right here. So the City of Aspen's been working with equestrians as far as getting a soft surface alternative alignment down along the Aspen Mass Trail to connect from Cozy Point over up to the Rio. They right now have that proposed for 2017. Then looking at long-term regional trail connections, all of these were part of the study from last year. So I wanted to include them in this plan because the idea of having a hard surface trail connection from Aspen to the Rio Grande Trail heading down valley continues to be brought up, as well as in different planning efforts looking at better connections between Aspen and the down valley communities. So that was split out as a few different alternatives. By no means are they proposed all to be done at the same time, and we're also not looking for a decision at this time. The idea being that we could look at long-term regional trail connections after we've looked at Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the Rio, and the near-term regional trail connections. So the ones that are in this plan are the different ways to get the Rio Grande Trail connected to the ABC Burlingame area, which has, I think it's 2 different bridge alternatives from behind the ABC, and then the one from last year, the option 4, from down by the Sardi house over. There's a bridge connection alternative from the Rio to the Intercept lot, and then there's the major expensive one, that's the trail along Highway 82 that would require a lot of structures in there. But the goal of these long-term potential regional trail connections is the hard surface connection. A few different action items that are left under the recreation portion of this was the climbing and ice climbing. We're proposing no fixed hardware, and that if anyone would want to request that, they could go through the process in the Gold Butte management plan. Right now in the Roaring Fork Gorge, the ice climbing would still go on. We're not proposing that there be any fixed hardware to facilitate that. And then we are saying that we don't believe there's a need for climbing, or it wouldn't be safe at least, to climb on this overhanging rock feature. This is the Rio right now. There's not a lot of space in there. There won't be a lot of belay space. The use we see on the Rio, we just don't see it jiving well with the space that would be needed to climb this feature. We also are proposing an update to the OST sign standards and implementation of them. Specifically, we need to update our sign standards when it comes to trailhead signage. We are proposing that we do that this winter, early next year. This is something that would be facilitated by our need in the gorge, but something we need to do system-wide. Update our sign standards to accommodate a few things, such as the fishing access, fishing easements, as well as the trailheads. Those two things are the major thing. And we also need to look at our surrounding agencies and what they're doing and make sure that we're driving with that. And the last item under the recreation part was interpretive sign plan. We're proposing in 2016 to begin a interpretive sign plan for this area. There's a lot of interesting history, geologic and man-made history in this area, as well as there's just a lot of cool use down there. So in the future, after Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the Rio are complete, we could look at a few different places where interpretive signs could occur. For commercial use and commemorative opportunities, well, commercial use, special use, and commemorative opportunities action items, we do have an action item in here. We feel that there's a need to have a commercial fly fishing guide permit system. Right now, the fishing guides are the only commercial use out there that are not under a permit system. In the meantime, they're having a huge impact with parking and access down into the gorge. The guides themselves seem to actually be in support of this, so we're proposing that next summer we have a steering committee to look at that, and then it's something that we could, again, the gorge is the area in most need demand right now, but it would be something that could be expanded to encompass the rest of the open space system. There's already a study going on and continues to go on at looking at the special events in there, and we do feel that there's a need for that, and so we call that out in here, saying that there's this ongoing effort, and we support it and feel the need for it in this area. The last action item is commemorative opportunities. Right now, we have a moratorium on commemorative opportunities. The city of Aspen does have their tree opportunity where you can purchase a tree. In this plan, we are not identifying any new opportunities, but we do say in the future when final design happens for different areas like the parks or the trail, that different opportunities could be identified at that time. But right at a master or management plan level, we're not at the level to identify them. So just to kind of go through the timeline again, next summer would be a busy summer, and then things would build upon that. Acquisition would always be ongoing as opportunities occur. Natural resources, we're proposing that next year we would like to do a wildlife and vegetation study update, which would feed into a river conservation plan in 2015. Next year, we need to do Stein Bridge repairs. We also are proposing that we would do Phase 1 of the Rio and the Jaffe Connector, as well as the Burlingame study, which could all feed into Phase 2 of the Rio. And then also the update to the sign standards. So looking to the future, then we would Stein Bridge repairs would happen. We would do the Jaffe Park, Stein Park, and then look at Aspen, Mass. Rio Grande Phase 2, then long-term regional trail connections, and then an interpretive sign plan potentially in 2016. And then next year for commercial and special use, we would like to do the fly fishing guide permit system, and then also the continuing of the special event policy. So next steps about all this are that we have 2 months of public comment kicking off today. We would like everything back by November 6th. We have 3 different open houses and 2 bike tours planned. The open houses for this project are not user specific. They are for everybody and anybody. We tried to vary the time and place in the days of the week so that hopefully one place, one time would work for everybody. If not, you're always welcome to get online and comment online, or you can contact me directly if you have any questions. The 2 bike tours, we do request that people RSVP, and you can do that through our website as well. We have seen in the past where we have to cancel them at last minute because of weather. So it'd just be great to kind of get a head count and be able to contact people in the event that it has to be canceled. And the goal is to take everything we learn in the 2 months and update the plan and bring it all back again at the joint meeting in December. So, any questions?
Wow.
You can give you a little rest from your presentation. First, I want to really compliment staff. This was really a great report, great public process, and a lot of really good information. So you guys really stepped up and accomplished, I think, what we had asked you to do. So thank you. One quick comment. When I first looked at the introduction, and people may not be able to see this, but what really stood out was the view of the gorge in 1887 and the view of the gorge today. When you look at the vegetation that has occurred over 125 years, it's pretty remarkable how green it has become. I have a couple questions. Lindsay, when you were talking about the users and Jaffe Park, between the boaters, and there certainly is a lot of commercial outfitters that are operating out there, and the fishermen, was there any discussion in terms of any conflicts between the fishermen and the boaters or commercial outfitters?
I guess I don't recall there being conflicts. I think the thing that we would hear would be if boaters they're not supposed to park there, if they were, the commercial operations aren't supposed to linger there, and if they were, just the problems that would inflict on those who are members of the public wanting to access in there. But I don't recall there being.
Well, I mean, basically, the great thing about our permit system is it has reduced that conflict. We used to have that conflict when I started here. There was huge conflict between commercial use and private use. And what we were able to do at that time is develop a commercial use permit system that dictated to the commercial users how they should use this area. And over the last, 3 big seasons, this past season was a pretty good year. The year before wasn't, but the year before that was. And in the big years, what we have seen is our rangers are busy down there, making sure that the commercial users are getting out of the circle and doing all these things. But the great thing is, complaint-wise, what we've received from the public is almost zero. So it's been more conflict between commercial users and not necessarily commercial users and the public. The public, we've created steps down to another eddy where the public can get access to the river. The commercial users have been great to allow rafting, the private rafting people to come into the circle and to unload and everything in there. So it's working right now. So, the updates to the Jaffe plan are not huge, but the bathrooms have been, a big question mark is, can we get something a little better than what we've got down there now? And, the parking area doesn't allow for horse trailer parking or private trailer parking. Can we improve that? And we will start looking at that as an action item.
Yeah, I was a little confused, Lindsay, when you're talking about the different phases, in phase 1 and phase 2 for the, in terms of doing some trail work. So phase 1, you're looking at doing the lower 2 miles of the gorge, a dual surface along the sage flats. Mm-hmm. For next year, 2014. But you're also going to be looking at doing any, depending on what comes to OST and to the BOCC for recommendations. Any work on the upper 2 miles of the gorge
No.
in 2014?
We're proposing that phase 1 be designed and implemented, and then look at phase 2. So see how use has changed, if use hasn't changed, how people feel about that upper 2 miles at that time, and see kind of where the public is at that point.
Okay, so then we're looking at the earliest 2015 for that section.
To start looking at the planning of it.
All right, Michael?
Since we're on Jaffe Park, and this is something I covered with Gary a long time ago, but for me, the parking in Jaffe Park is completely backwards. And in as much as you're parking on the river, right? You're facing the river. You pull in and you park on the river, which doesn't make sense to me. It's the most valuable property around. And aside from just the aesthetics of parking on the river, of course, those vehicles are shedding all those oil and hydrocarbons at the river's edge. And I think the whole park, the way people park there should be looked at and changed, because it's just not right, really, is what it amounts to. So some other comments. I'm glad you called the John Denver thing. The pond that irrigates this Homer Stein Ranch is fed by the Red Mountain Ditch, not the Susquehanna.
Okay.
And I don't remember the chain of title for the Stein Park, but I remember being at a dedication there. And I thought it was from the Stein's property to the city of Aspen. I didn't know that there was an intermediate Aspen Valley Land Trust, so apparently I was confused.
Can I just make a footnote on that too? The park was originally dedicated as Freddie Fisher Park, and then Mary really wanted it renamed after her father. He wouldn't hear of it, so she waited until he passed, and they rededicated the park.
Okay, so that's the ceremony that I was at. Okay. So other than that, I think the plan is superb. I mean, because we have started to look at the entire stretch and all the assets involved there and all the connections. We're doing it in a graduated way. I think the challenge for the Open Space and Trails Board is sort of define what they're looking for in terms of preserving it for the next 50 years. The goals that they're going to meet, because I think the approach that the majority opinion wants this is okay, but it doesn't work really for good planning in terms of preservation into the future. It informs you, but I think the Open Space and Trails is going to have sort of a mission, and how their changes to the conditions there meet that mission. And I think that's a real challenge for the Open Space and Trails Board right now. And if you go to Zion Park, it's very similar in terms of you're following a riverbed primarily, some by buses, by mass transit, and then some on foot. And they've done a fairly good job given the numbers of people that go through that gorge. So I think a field trip to Zion is in order.
Okay.
Let's go. See you guys.
Because it's very similar in terms of the feeling of complete isolation, but heavy use at the same time. So those are my comments.
Steve? You mentioned several places in the study about the ADA rules. And at times I got the feeling that you were trying to make every trail ADA compliant, but I want to know what are your requirements that you're required to do, and how many access points do you figure need to be ADA compliant?
ADA for outdoor recreation facilities, there's lots of intricacies, but in generally, the guidelines are you need to try to achieve ADA accessibility. If you can't meet it, which in our area, just geologically, 99% of the time, you're not going to be able to meet it when it comes to a trail. if you can't meet it, you need to be able to demonstrate why. The Rio Grande Trail is one of the few, if not the only, trail that can and currently does meet ADA accessibility in our valley. Because of, I mean, it's an old railroad grade, so naturally it is meets it with the grades are more gentle and gradual. So the different areas that you can currently access it from parking, I mean, if the trail itself is going to be able to meet ADA guidelines, we should try to meet it with the parking. And if it's not going to, you know, be expensive, or if it's not going to cause a huge impact, something that we can do fairly easily, relatively speaking, then it's something that I guess we should try to do. I did meet with Challenge Aspen staff. They requested to go out there and look at it all. So I had a great walkthrough with them out on the trail, looking at a few different things. And so, it was great to talk to them, because they don't really have, people do, they'll start in Aspen and go all the way down to wherever they want to stop, Basalt or Carbondale or Glenwood, but they said right now it's hard to like take a group or for somebody on their own to go do that. They have to be dropped off and shuttled. And so there's little things we can do to facilitate that. I think that we should, and legally we need to try.
Okay. And second question, a lot of the comments from the bicyclers and the commuters refer to a bike trail along McLean Flats Road, which you haven't mentioned that in this plan, and I realize it's a little bit outside the study area, but it directly would impact.
Yeah.
I mean, a McLean Flats bike trail could be used as an alternative route into Aspen for having a paved trail all the way from Glenwood to Aspen. So I think that should be part of the study.
Okay, well, we could add, because last year for the feasibility study, we looked at climbing lanes. We didn't look at a fully separated bike path, but I could add the climbing lanes in as one of the long-term potential connections.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be one of the long-term connections.
Other questions or comments? Paul?
I've got a bunch of them here. One question that I had was on the river conservation plans. You had some studies designed to feed information into those river conservation plans, and those studies were 2014 studies for the plan in 2015. My question is, has Healthy Rivers and the Roaring Fork Conservancy weighed in on that, and can we like prep them to have data to feed into that river conservation plan and have them be a part of that as well, so that they have their studies in line as well?
So the answer is yes. We've been trying to coordinate a site tour for both, and it just hasn't been working. So we're hoping that we can get at least portions of each group to the different site tours we have scheduled. And then also, the Roaring Fork Conservancy had a bunch of data to give me on the water itself, the different testing they do, but it was like overwhelming to get into this right now. So
Right.
It would be something definitely we can use into the river conservation plan.
Right, so that they're up to speed on it, and that is one of the coordination things. I was curious on the Stein Park improvements in 2016 and Jaffe Park in 2015, because it felt like the weighting in this was identifying more gaps or flaws in the Stein Park end of things rather than the Jaffe Park. And so I was wondering if the timing on that wasn't wrong, or if you were, what went into the decision to fix issues at Jaffe prior to Stein?
Working with the city's current schedule. So we can work with them on seeing if it could get moved up, but right now that was where they thought it would fit. As far as Stein Park, so.
The other question that I had was on the parking question, because it seems like we've got a bit of a problem in that if you build it, they will come. You're going to fill, there's some, like a general consensus that you're going to always have full parking lots wherever you have them. And I'm sensitive to the paved paradise thing, that criticism that we just don't need to keep making bigger parking lots. We have parking lots at the Intercept lot. We have a lot of parking up at the airport. We're going to have a new connection under Highway 82 from the airport over into the ABC. And I'm wondering about like if we can get a better handle on our parking requirements through like a parking study itself, or if there's a way to do a dispersed parking with smaller lots at the other ends of the different regional trail connections. So I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with just building the Stein Park bigger and the Jaffe Park parking bigger if there's not a different emphasis that we could have. So I don't know how we would go about getting a better handle on the parking questions.
It's a great point, because we'll never build enough for all the parking, but the biggest point for us is trying to address the issues that we have. And yeah, is it through creating different parking lots? Is it creating, like when we talked about with you guys earlier, is it creating more incentives for people to hike there, or anything else, or the disincentive that there isn't a lot of parking? I think one of the goals of this plan, and we can reword a little bit of Stein Park and Jaffe Park, is really to, and I think we have it in there, is to reorganize or just to relook at the overall parking areas and see how it's working now and how it can work better in the future, because I think Stein Park, is one of those that really hasn't been looked at in that type of way. And so is there opportunity to expand a little bit? There might be. And is there opportunity to realign some of it? There might be. Jaffe Park's the same way. Michael brings up a very good point. Jaffe Park has that same ability to go, do we just want to create 40 more spaces? Or in our commercial use permit system with the anglers, do we reduce parking by, requiring that not the fishing guides and their clients park at Jaffe Park like they're doing now? And that's one of the reasons why it's so slammed. So we can get that more like we require from the rafting companies, is to pick them up and shuttle them to this place. So I think that's one of the things we should maybe expand a little bit in the action item, not just to say that we're increasing parking, but is to look at the overall thing, because I think it's a very good point overall, is to not just look to increase, it's to look to do better with what we got.
Can I just piggyback off of that just for 1 second? Just in terms of Stein Park, because I haven't actually looked at the Go Butte master plan, but I know one of the ideas was, because they had constricted parking up there, that they were going to also utilize Stein Park. Actually, you were going to encourage people to park at Stein Park because they're limited up in McLean Flat. So that sort of adds another little wrench into this.
You're right. That's one of the reasons why we want to expand some of the parking, because we just know it's overused right now, and adding some more parking would be beneficial if possible. Or, one of the things is just looking at the parking area and what we have at Stein Park now, can we reorganize it to do better and to have a better sight line back onto McLean Flats Road and to do all that? So, it's a tough one, because we are increasing the use out there. The use is increasing on its own no matter what. And so, one of the things that we've done in the past is we have actually improved that lot and created that commercial use rafting permit system to avoid people bringing parking in, and to allow the rafting companies to have their own space outside the parking lot to come in there. But a more holistic view has to be looked at Stein Park. And one of the things that Dale and I are going to talk to the city about is pushing up the timeline for it. But, like a management plan process, that wasn't on their top radar to do. So right now, they have 2016 as their time. So Dale and I will work with them potentially to up that timeline a little bit so we could, address some of these issues. But honestly, some of the disincentives of having a small lot is some people were hoping the climbing community can bike there and to not have to just, utilize parking areas there. And so it's the same thing with everybody else. If you're going to kite the gorge or even bike in the gorge, can you start from town and try to provide better access from town to the Rio? The city has worked on trying to stripe better through there. There's a lot of different things we can do. This plan just sets in motion a look at that.
I had two other items. One was on your adjacent users and connections map, that I thought you needed to update that to include the Cozy Line and the airline trails, which hopefully will be fait accompli here shortly, because those are at least single track connections as well, and I know that there was a lot of comments had come in about connecting to those trails or trying to see how they fit into the picture. So I thought that that was a keeping your adjacent users map current would be good. The other comment is that inside of this you've got the waterfall. You referred to it as the waterfall during your comments. In here it's referred to as sewer falls. And I just thought, yuck. Who wants to go hang out at sewer falls? It just brings up a bad connotation in my mind.
That's where everybody knows what they are.
I've always thought of it as the ice climbing falls, or
Well, the ice climbers refer to it as the sewer
the
ice.
sewer
so.
falls. Well,
It would help with the parking congestion.
yeah, I guess it would. And then I have some typos that I'll give you. So.
Rob, and then Michael?
I think it's a very well thought out plan and tremendous amount of work went into it. My question is, we've got a couple more months of public comment and user, the larger groups of people coming together. And in the major piece of this plan, the management actions section, I think it would be helpful, or at least it would be helpful for me, but I think it would be helpful for the public to have a kind of a decision-making matrix of who and when decisions are being made for these various pieces. I mean, this is a plan which is somewhat of a recommendation or a guideline for what we're doing, but there's still decision points for each one of those. Are we going to do option A or option B on 4.3.3.3? And when, you've got this laid out, but when is that decision going to be made and who's going to make it? Is this a joint open space and trails and BOCC decision? Is this an administrative decision that's being done by the open space and trails staff? Because I think it's really important to say to the public that this is a guideline. This is, this doesn't mean that we're actually going to accomplish everything that's in here. These are ideas, and then there's going to be a decision-making process. Because there are things in here that I very much agree with, and there are things in here that I probably wouldn't vote for, and I don't want to vote the whole plan down based on that one individual thing. So I think somehow, and I think this is missing in a lot of our plans when we have these long, out to 2018 and beyond type guidelines, it's just not clear to the public, and when we pass the plan, the public thinks that this is set in stone moving forward. So to me, I think that is one piece that's really missing and would be really helpful to have in here.
It's one of those things that we added to the Sky Mountain Park plan is a specific statement saying that all, basically all future decisions will be made through the budget process. And the budget process is an open space board recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. And I think that would help a lot with this, is to have the public understand that every year you're going to come in with recommendations and it's going to go through a whole another approval process. So yeah, I think that's something that we did miss in this.
something that we can...
And I think it's important to point out the option A or option B on these things, which is, well, option A is, you know, we do this surface on this section for this reason. But if we don't do that, this is what we end up with. And that's a decision that's going to be made in 2015 by so-and-so, you know, because I think people see these on the website and they're like, oh my God, you agreed to all of this? And that's really not what we're trying to accomplish here, in my opinion.
To that point, Tim?
Yeah, to that point, just a reminder, and it's a very good process point, Rob, that in the hour we had before our joint meeting, the staff wants the 10 of us to give anything we don't say here that they're making notes of immediately, because this will be revised as of theoretically today or tomorrow, and will then be the public comment copy that everyone can see. So if you have small or large points, try to get them to staff if you can today. We were asked to do that as well. But it's an important addition you made.
Were you done, Rob? I think Michael and Steve?
Just a question on page 2. I think that we have the historic image of the trees and then meters and what was the form?
Don't know. Yeah.
We should find out.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me, my guess would be that they're trying to transfer water away from Lawrenceburg to some other location, probably on some sagebrush flats, but I'm not sure.
That's an excellent question, and that's one of the things that was an eye-opener for me, is how quickly we're losing our knowledge base about some of these features, even though I think of our civilization as a fairly recent occurrence in this valley, but some of that's disappearing. So I'll try to find that out. And we're still looking for a photograph of the bridge on the county road. Came up the bottom of the gully, so $100 to the first person to find us a picture of it.
And if anyone knows what the rock structure is along the Rio and the Aspen Grove up valley of Cemetery Lane, there's an old foundation in there, but nobody knows what that is either. So Dale will give them $100 too.
No, just want the photograph.
The historical piece to me is really important too, and I'd love to see a map of the county road system when the Midland and the DNRG were both running. How did people get all around the whole county? That's always fascinated me, but maybe bringing in the Aspen Historical Society or somebody to really try to find out some of these things might be a good idea.
That's where we did get a lot of these photos.
I'm sure, yeah.
On the trail of that map. We're great minds.
Just a thought about the parking issue at both ends, the Stein and Jaffe parks. They both have fairly close raft connections, one being the Cemetery Lane bus and the other the Woody Creek bus. And maybe those routes could be adjusted or push those as a means for people to get to those locations rather than have them park. And that could be part of the whole management plan in the future. And last, I think you guys did an awesome job on this plan. It's very comprehensive, and I mean, we're making comments on minor things that we see, but by and large, you did an awesome job of bringing all this together and over the summer.
Hi.
Yeah, I guess Lindsay wasn't here and you guys weren't here. Just the one comment I had was that I think it needs to address the water in the river. And so Gary and Dale made that note, but I thought Lindsay should hear it too.
And maybe back to Hawk's point, we should get Healthy Rivers and Streams Board involved as well.
We discussed it, but I just
We
wanted
discussed
to put it out there for Lindsay.
Okay, thanks. That's good.
comments. Lindsay or Dale, the public comment period will end November 6th, and then your board will have a meeting prior to our next joint meeting. And then I'm just kind of curious, I'm a little confused in terms of if there will be any real decision points at our joint meeting, and if so, will the Open Space and Trails Board be bringing forth those recommendations to us at our joint meeting in December?
It's a great question, and it occurs to me as you were speaking that meanwhile we're going to be going through our budget process for 2014. So I guess probably the most urgent decision points will have to do with what we're going to budget for actual action in 2014. I think that as we attempted to do over the summer, we're going to need to check in with both boards as we work our way through the fall. Our goal is that there won't be any surprises by the time we get to a final draft that we're proposing for adoption, and we're going to be scrambling to dovetail that process to mesh the gears with a budget process where by mid-November, as you know, we're going to be proposing a final budget for 2014. So in that sense, we may be somewhat prejudging the very final adopted plan because of the timing on the budget process. But I think that top row of the action items gives you a pretty good preview of the things that we're likely to be proposing. So if the public comments come back extremely negative on something that's up there, we might see an adjustment in our proposal on the final.
Okay. Do we have lunch here? So maybe we're scheduled to go to 12:45. Why don't we take 10 minutes, grab some lunch, and come back, and we can do just some general updates in terms of what else staff has been working on. Grassroots, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
acceptable to me if I can see what it looked like, and it's not going to look all that much different from what it looked like on the historical appearance of it, having that bridge there.
Yeah, we had that for the regular one. It's going to look a lot different because the one used to span that entire upper area, so it was much higher above the area. So, but it's kind of trying to recreate that, is trying to recreate the grade of the whole thing. But yeah, we'll get that back out. Well, we started talking about the special events study. You guys are all aware of that one. The study's coming to a close, and we're going to kind of come up with some recommendations and work with community development, and then our board and the Board of County Commissioners on, what recommendations we have for the future.
Did you guys get any comments on the recent Ragnar race along the trail, positive or negative, or any impacts at all? That was a few weekends ago.
Ragnar is one of the few companies that does a really good job of making sure they have notice in the paper, notice on the trails. Unbelievable. And they worked with us on timing to do it at a slower time of year for us. So Ragnar, overall has been really good, and we've received very little complaints on the Ragnar race.
Well, they're also spaced out.
They are very spaced out.
They just run 100 miles, and they're relay teams, so they're spaced out by hours and hours.
Yeah, not that much. I was on the trail that day riding the bike, and it was a steady flow of people.
It's more than you expect at once, but it's not a huge one, but I think they've done a pretty adequate job of warning people, and it is it's not a heavy use time of year, so.
Yeah.
And for all of you who don't know about Gold Butte, which you all should, Gold Butte has been moving. The Gold Butte Management Plan was approved by the Open Space and Trails Board, and then we did a location and extent approval process with the P&Z, and right now we are working with the local climbing community. The local climbing community and the Access Fund, which is a nonprofit climbing organization throughout the world, has really come together to start to get this place ready to open to the public. The climbing community has been amazing. They've been installing anchors and climbing this area and trying to make it, fully climbable and safe for everybody. And we've gotten a lot of volunteers to do the new trails, more sustainable trails to the climbing access. And so this has been a really great community project where Open Space and Trails has just facilitated the stewardship of it, and the climbing community itself has come out and really implemented the plan. Annie and Bob Wade have been really instrumental in making this happen. It's been really fun to watch. And so we're looking, I don't know, I haven't heard back from Bob and Annie yet about...
I think he's out of town.
He must be out of town because he usually emails me a few times a week about progress and everything else. But we're getting closer to an opening. Watch this management plan page, and we'll put it on Facebook and everything else. And, when it's ready to be open, we'll open it.
So again, back to my earlier question in terms of parking, since I haven't seen the management plan, are you looking at doing any additional parking up top where the current parking is for the Sunnyside Trail and the access?
No, right now, we didn't want to do any more up top because it's pretty dangerous. It's not the greatest place to have parking. I think a lot of people on McLean Flats know that there's a parking area there, and it's been pretty well used, so we're not trying to create a lot more on McLean Flats, but we're going to use this Roaring Fork Gorge management plan process to help determine, what type of parking we need in the future, and then we also got to see what type of use we get. I don't know yet. I think it's going to be popular, but we just don't know yet how many people are going to use it. And honestly, in the midsummer, I was out there. It's hot. It's
too hot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we're going to see more use in the shoulder seasons or the off hours in the summer.
Yeah.
I don't, that middle of the day parking issue, I don't think this is going to have a big impact because honestly, it's just too freaking hot out there.
Right,
So we'll see, we're
We'll
gonna
see.
monitor
Could
it.
be wrong.
yeah.
We could definitely, you just never know with this. I mean, the more people get to see it, it's something that people don't have any real clue about what really the possibilities out there, so.
Yeah. Michael?
See it?
I'm sorry, I had my mouth full when we left the special events, but I think we need to coordinate with RAFTA and have some joint committee, because you have two sections of trail here, but really people looked at this trail, particularly for special events, as one continuous trail. And so if RAFTA has a different policy, then you're the spoiler. If you have a policy, then RAFTA's the spoiler. You know, it's a situation that actually the county gets in with special events where we share jurisdictions with other people, and it makes for a difficult approval process, and it puts you in an uncomfortable position. So I think once you come up with your study, you need to think about the full Rio Grande length.
Cool. Any other things on Gold Beard? Smuggler Mountain Forestry. So, you know, we've talked about, keep going down, go down to the map. Thanks. And then we've talked about the Hunter Creek Smuggler Cooperative Plan that we've worked with ACES, the City of Aspen, a ton of stakeholders, and the Forest Service on. And one of the things we were doing is the Smuggler Mountain Open Space Forestry Management Plan was completed 2 years ago, and we've been implementing that plan. One of the goals is to further that plan by including the Forest Service lands around it. And ACES took the lead on this, and the city and county worked with them on how to do projects beyond just Smuggler Mountain Open Space, because if you're really going to do landscape scale projects, you need to start looking at a larger area. And you know, this map shows the plan for 2013. The co-op plan right now is has got a record of decision. The EA is done. The record of decision has been released, and any person or organization that commented in the original comment period is allowed to comment again. It's a 45-day period. And what in that plan for 2013 are some extra forestry projects. In the blue here is Smuggler Mountain Open Space. It's not blown out, but the city of Aspen is this way. This is Smuggler Mountain Road going through it. And so on City of Aspen and Pickens County Open Space, we're proposing 2 projects. Well, we're actually going to do 2 projects. They were in our management plan, and we have budgeted for them last year. And one of them, this one is in an area that was pretty heavily hit by the beetles. And what we're going to do is a lodgepole removal area, and we're going to take out all the lodgepoles in that area and allow regeneration. It's actually next to some aspen stands, so we're going to see how what's going to come in after that. But it's really to improve the age diversity up there and not have just everything be, you know, one single age group. And then the other project is an aspen stand that's not regenerating on its own very well, and conifers are moving in, and that's one of those areas where we're going to come in and remove everything in that area, and it'll stimulate the aspen regeneration in that area. So the thing we've been working on with ACES and the Forest Service is to expand some areas out into the forest over here, and basically they picked 2 sites over here. This one connects with ours, but these 2 sites and these 4 sites are proposed for 2013. Once the comment period is in, potentially we'll be able to do all these projects together, and they're very similar to ours. They're mostly a lodgepole in areas that were hit by beetles. They're lodgepole improvement areas where they're right next to aspen groves, and where aspen groves, some of the aspen groves are actually regenerating really well. So removing some of the lodgepoles in those areas is actually going to potentially stimulate aspen regeneration into those areas. And some of the areas are not doing so well, and hopefully by removing and disturbing the soil when coming in to remove them, we'll start regenerating areas. So, as you can see, most of the areas, the Forest Service areas are a little bit bigger, but they're about 2-acre pieces. This is about an acre piece here. And so right now they're proposing to remove, based on Old Road, in and out. It is just a forwarder to forward it to the road, and then the road would bring it down to the landing area that we use for our Smuggler Mountain projects. So, if that comment period goes well, we'll be seeing these projects start coming in 2013, later this fall. We're going to do a pretty big outreach effort with ACES. So this is the first time we're letting the elected officials know, but basically we're going to be doing a pretty large PR piece, and ACES is already kicking that into gear to make sure the public is aware, just like we've been doing for the last 5 years on Smuggler Mountain Open Space, about trucks and logging and what this is all about and why we're doing it, and to have people understand the why is the most important, because some of these are not necessarily as in your face as you can imagine, so they're going to be way back there. So why are you doing it back there? What's it doing? And honestly, what it is doing, it's creating age diversity, but it's also improving wildlife habitat in these areas. One of the projects that's not on this map and that will be generated pretty quickly is on Smuggler Mountain Open Space. We're going to expand last year we did an oak brush thin right on Smuggler Mountain Road, pretty close to Aspen. This year, the city of Aspen and Pickens County, and the city's really been pushing this, is trying to come up with a fuel hazard mitigation project. And obviously it's going to benefit wildlife because it's going to be setting back oak brush back to an earlier stage in growth, which is more vigorous and better for wildlife. But what it is, it's going to be on the edge of Aspen, and what it's going to really do is hopefully tie into a larger piece on how we can get a full, more natural looking fire break between the more natural areas and the city of Aspen. And hopefully this project is about 6 acres, and it's right near the Mascot 99 property that the city of Aspen owns. And I'll get maps and more as soon as we finalize that date, and that'll be on this project website. But the city of Aspen is going to be doing, and Pickens County with their wildfire person, is going to be doing some major outreach to all the neighbors in that area. The Aspen Fire District is very excited and willing to help on this, because they have been trying to push for a long time, is trying to find a way from Red Mountain all the way through to McSkimming Road, is trying to find a way to get these, more natural looking fire breaks throughout, so it can kind of help the fire district get these fires early. And it also will, it's not just going to be on the public land. This one will start in public land, but we're hoping this spurs all the rest, because the fire district is going to take this and work with the neighboring landowners up on Red Mountain and everything else to try to get this more natural area where you can have areas where the firefighters are safe going into and can really help, control this. Plus, the benefit is these oak areas, oak brush areas, service brush areas haven't been touched. They're a disturbance-driven ecosystem where fires used to come through, and none of that has happened in well over 100 years. And so, those areas aren't going to be allowed to burn. We'd love to just burn the whole thing. We're not going to be able to do it. So, having these areas near town, being able to bring it down to lower the intensity of the fire at this stage will be a really good thing. And then one of the things that this will allow us to do is, if we could do these fire breaks early on, we might be able to start prescribed burning further up, is because if we can protect the city of Aspen, if we're not worried about a fire, the wind just magically going the wrong way, that we can potentially start burning in the upper areas and let the natural, because this is not, I'm not going to say it's mimicking fire by any means, it's just setting some of the oak back like it used to be. It's not the same, and if we could burn areas that really need the burning, the fire does the best. Questions?
Any questions on that?
Red Ridge Ranch, and now we've the Red Ridge Ranch is the Salt and Stall property, and the Glacier Ranch. What we're going to do is, we're basically, because we're able to get potentially the Glacier Ranch under contract and purchased, we're going to combine these two properties into a larger management plan, and we're going to create a steering committee of neighbors, recreationists, agriculture, you name, and the local agencies that help manage all the lands around there, ACES, Forest, BLM, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and Eagle County, Pitkin County, Town of Basalt, and get a management plan written for both of these properties, because what we're doing is combining what used to be combined, and it works a lot better as a full management plan than it will be in pieces. So we've sent an email out to our entire list so people understand that we're not delaying it, we're just waiting for the Glacier Ranch to close sometime probably early 2014, and then we're going to get a bigger committee together and try to create a management plan for the larger area.
Yeah, I mean, coincidentally, tomorrow, I'm going to be going down with staff to the BLM's office. They're releasing their draft of their resource management plan. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they determine what the crown is going to be, because that will play into this.
Sure. Yep. Okay. We've been working with the BLM really well on the salt and stall piece, so I don't think there'll be any major surprises for us. Hope not. Cool. Keep going. This Lindsay parcel open space, the management plan is in public review right now. You can get the draft management plan on this website. The Lindsay parcel is right here. And basically, the idea is to protect some of this wildlife area and this the old flume disturbance area here, and then potentially look at how we can connect trails from, the Verena Mallory parcel and the Verena Mallory Trail to the Lanny White Trail, create a more sustainable grade up there, separate uses, create more opportunity for trails in a very heavily used area. So the management plan is in public review right now, and it'll be coming back to the Open Space Board sometime in October.
Are you getting much feedback on that draft plan?
I haven't checked with the city at first. No, I mean most of the feedback we're getting is from, the original set of people who really would love to see this better connection for biking in here, but also, some people do want a more sustainable grade to hike there too. So.
Is it a better connection just to the lower Hunter Creek Trail, or are you going to try to do a connection to the Smuggler Mountain Trail?
Right now, the connection is going to come down to the Lanny White Trail.
So you're not looking at anything between here?
We're not looking at anything through here. This is private property with a conservation easement on it that does not have a trail easement on it. This is that old flume that blew out, that cut, which is a really, really rough area to get through. So, the logistics of trying to connect this are something that we're not really looking into right now. In the future, it's always the possibility. And the bike park. This is a joint project with the Town of Basalt. The Town of Basalt's been a good partner on this one. And this was part of the management plan for Grace Sheehy, was to create a bike park in the old area that used to be used as a landfill by the former landowners, and was used as a dumping ground for all the material that came out of the water tank up there. We actually were able to use all the material they dumped for the water tank. We just rented a bulldozer and pushed it. It was actually really good material to build this bike park with. And so, right now we've got a contractor out there. This is a joint project with the town. And, there's going to be 2 dirt jump lines, one advanced and one beginner, and then a pump track. And we're starting to work with.
And everybody knows what those are, right?
There are people on TV right now who are excited about that stuff.
Can we, can we have an on-site visit we each get to try it?
You are more than welcome.
Bring your
to try it.
BMX.
If you don't know what it is, you probably don't want to try it.
This is actually built for more than BMX. This is a mountain bike too. You can use your mountain bike in here. The jumps are set up so it's not just a BMX area. The cool thing is the Basalt High School is starting a mountain bike team, and they are been very interested in helping us do, because one of the questions is, the town of Basalt really is the one who's supposed to maintain a lot of this in the future, and how do they get the help to do this? And I think this mountain bike team and the Basalt High School is like really excited about this whole thing. And there's a couple parents out there that have been really excited. And the way they build this, it's amazing. They have this little ATV with Volkswagen Bug tires on it, and they ride through it and pack it down. So the maintenance shouldn't be huge, and if we can get the kids out there helping us maintain it, and some of the parents there too, we're not expecting open space to really be much of a maintainer here. It'll be the town of Basalt and the local community. So, the great thing is another one that people are just pumped, cannot wait to see. So hopefully we actually might be done by this weekend, but I'm not going to say that for official. We'll see.
Gary had fun explaining this to Billy Grange.
Oh yeah, Billy Grange showed up on his ATV. He was looking at the ditch here, and he just looked at it and he goes, "What is that?" And I was like, "Well, it's a bike park." And he's like, "A bike what?" I'm like, "A bike park." And he's like, "Bikes need to park?" And I'm like, "No, it's a place to jump and all this other stuff." And I'm like, "You're more than welcome to use it." He just looked at me and he started laughing. So he's just like, different generation, different use. But you know what? The great thing is he's like, we work together. He's got his access still to the ditch and everything like that. He's just like, cool. He asked if he could ride his ATV in it, and I told him no. But
You want to update them about the garden?
oh yeah, I can do a quick update on the community garden. The community garden has been a super success, and it's amazing if you go out there and see it. They're getting to the point where they might be asking for that extra half acre that they got approved in the management plan. We'll see, but they did not expect it to take just 2 years to fill out a half an acre. So it's been a really successful project. The town of Basalt's been managing that one completely, but it's really the Mid-Valley Community Garden Collective. They have 2 people who run this thing, and it's amazing. They've done an incredible job. So we've been, it's been such a great resource for, residents in that area. And it's, on their list, it's not just, just town of Basalt residents. There's some, people from Holland Hills that are in there and stuff. So it's been really pretty impressive. It's good stuff. Sky Mountain Park, 2 trails are going in right now. Hopefully we're getting close to finishing them both. The Cozy Line Trail, which will connect the Intercept Lot and Cozy Point Ranch with Skyline Ridge. This trail has been amazing. We got 180 volunteers out there this year, and they put in 835 hours to help build that trail. But it wasn't enough. We used Youth Corps, and we're using the contractor to help finish it. But because this is a 3-mile long trail, it is really, I just walked it on Friday, and it's finally complete through, and you can walk the whole thing. It's one of those amazing things. And so, we're getting closer and closer to finishing this. Just this number alone, 180 people, show how many people are excited about trails in this valley. It is amazing with Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers as the lead agency, with also, Roaring Fork Mountain Bike Association. We were just shocked because they decided to do more days, and we're like, oh, you get 5 to 10 people. And on one day, they got 27 people for a night. And I was just blown away by the community support of this. We haven't seen this on other trails, so this is just something that is just building up within this whole thing. And so, potentially this is all bringing in, potential future funding. We've heard from some big money people that potentially they want to start putting money into these trails and helping us get these done quicker and all this other stuff. So it gets contagious. And the Airline Trail is moving along really well. We had a volunteer day at the beginning, and they built 1,000 feet in one day with 2 bridges, which was just great to see. And so the community support for both of these trails have been amazing. This is going to connect you from the Owl Creek Trail all the way up to the Cozy Line Trail, which brings you up to the Skyline Ridge Trail at the top of the radar. This is going to be great because, we're going to mostly stop public use on the Radar Road, which is just a road. It's steep, and it's not the great experience. This is going to be a lot more fun, and it's going to be a real blast to ride and hike up to the top there, and it connects Aspen really to the top of Sky Mountain Park. We almost done? No.
When were you thinking those would be open?
Right now, I'm meeting with them on Thursday afternoon to see the progress. So, it's looking early October that we're going to be able to work on that. We're going to have to work with the Cozy Line Trail. We're going to have to work with the equestrian community because the trail is really soft right now. And we're probably going to request that the equestrians stay off the Cozy Line Trail. Otherwise, they're just going to break through. We had that happen at the View Line Trail, and it takes a lot of staff time to repair. And I think a winter of snow and bike tires are actually really good, and hikers aren't heavy enough to poke through. So hikers and bikers and rain and snow and then some drying in the spring, I think we'll be ready. Because right now the View Line Trail on the other side can take horseshoes with no problem. And that took a little time to just settle out. So we're going to ask the equestrian community to just be a little patient, because I think, the trail is so soft. It was built a lot by volunteers and not by machines. And that is just, they could pop right through. So we're going to hope to do that. But we're probably going to open it to bikes and hikers on sometime in early October. So keep watching the website, and we'll send out big blasts.
So for Elk Park final design, if everyone recalls, we have a phase 1, which is the depot area, which is the site of the current cabin that's out there, and then phase 2 was the rest of the park. Phase 1's funded by Scenic Byway grant dollars. We continue to work with CDOT on getting our final design, final documents approved. The goal is to get the cabin demoed this fall and then start construction of phase 1 in the spring. Phase 2, we had applied for a GoCo Great Outdoors Colorado grant, a local parks and outdoor recreation grant to fund. We did not receive that grant. We continue to see very competitive, I guess it's just really competitive to get those grant dollars right now. I forget the numbers, but they maybe gave out $2 million and they got like $12 million worth of applications. So we're going to, in the budgeting process, I guess, bring forward a different route of potentially funding that area.
Let me just make a footnote on that, because you'll hear more about it during budget, but this has to do with the County Park Fund, which currently we kind of have some of that on loan out on the Prince Creek Trail situation, but in the fall, when we do come back with a staff recommendation, we're going to be looking for a kind of a contingent commitment on what might be left in the park fund, and then looking to make up whatever else we need through the open space fund to complete this design.
I think that was the last Brush Creek Trail Bridge.
I can just show them a picture if anyone hasn't been on the Brush Creek Trail. That bridge was placed and it's installed and people are using it, and honestly, the comments, 99% of the comments have been really positive. The bridge looks really good in the color Lindsay chose, and it's really, it sets in there really well, and honestly, we've gotten 0 complaints on it, and I think it's a great project, and it really connected the overall, connected the Brush Creek Bridge. We don't have to get in any more discussions about it. It is done.
Great.
Yay, no more discussions about it.
We are done.
So all that's on our projects website for anyone that's
Great. And perfect.
Is that all?
Is that
Not
all?
all.
We get that a lot from Dale.
Well, I think we're about ready to take a break, but I want to thank staff for the great presentation, and our joint meeting with Open Space and Trails Board is always good to have time to spend with you and share our thoughts as well. Dale?
George, I just want to let you know, I did forward the staff memo on your next item, the review of the county TDR program. I forwarded that to the Open Space Board trustees. I'll be there, but of course the TDR program is very significant in the psyches of the open space program, in that given the over 200 TDRs I think the county has issued, if you put a market value on those of $200,000, that's $20 million of acquisition finance that's gone out in that manner that didn't otherwise need to come through open space. So wherever the county decides to go with that, the two programs really need to fit together quite well, and so I'll be hanging out for that next item, and any of the trustees that want to see how that goes may hang out as well.
Okay. Well, thank you all again. Grassroots, we're going to take a 15-minute break. We're back here at 1 o'clock.
Thank you.
be a lot of analysis. But I think for us at this point, we're hoping to really see what of these things are issues for you and concerns, and what direction you want to give us to move forward with any changes to the program.
All right, thanks. I thought this was a well put together information and with a lot of these options. And a couple of my concerns for discussion points or for the board would be, well, first of all, I think the TDR program is still valuable. I think that if we want to continue to preserve limit development in rural and remote zones, then it's still a good tool. But I think there's opportunities to tweak it a little bit, and I guess I would first question the future potential in terms of limiting development in the rural and remote areas. Are we going to get to a point where we pretty much have accomplished that? I mean, at some point we're going to run out of land. And so what happens then? So that's one question. I'll just throw some of these questions out. I've always been concerned about looking at the discrepancy in terms of how many TDRs we are giving out for constrained lots versus conservation PUDs. I think that the county's been overly generous in that regard, and certainly on certain lots. And I would like to see more consistency of approach. So if it's one TDR versus 35 acres or whatever that is, versus having one TDR for 35 acres in one area, and then in another area, if it's a CD, PUD, or a constrained lot, it drops down to one TDR into 20 acres. I think that's not enough. I'm also concerned about trying to find a consistent message we can give out to people who are interested in coming before us for TDRs, whether it's for historical purposes or although it was probably an anomaly, archaeological, so that sometimes we give out one TDR. In one case, we gave out 3 TDRs to preserve our historic structure, and it seems like we're having to sort of negotiate and find ourselves into a position that if we don't agree to what the applicant is asking, then their response is, well, I'll just tear the structure down. And I don't think we should be caught into those situations. I also think that we have an opportunity to look at still preserving the TDR program, but also being able to decrease the current FAR limit, which is now one is able to build up to 15,000 square feet in the county using TDRs. And I think there's opportunity to drop that house size. I think that the current real estate market and the current trend in the country will show that people are actually less interested in building large homes. They understand the impact it has on our resources, the impact it has on our energy use, and the impact it has just in terms of maintenance. So given that trend, I think it's an opportunity to look at perhaps lowering that cap size, but still being able to maintain and not impair the current TDR program. So those are some of my initial questions and thoughts, just to get the conversation started. And I don't expect we're going to have any hard decisions made today, but I think it's a starting point for discussion and for staff to listen to some of our concerns and then come back perhaps with some more better defined recommendations. So I don't know if you want to try to answer some of those questions I have, at least the earlier ones.
Well, you're sort of looking at me, so Suzanne, if you don't mind, I'll just jump in real quickly.
Well,
but
whomever.
I think, yeah, it's sort of a team approach here. Lance and Suzanne obviously see this from the operational side, where we see what's coming in with the TDRs, what we're preserving and what's being built. And Suzanne did a great chart for you, I think, that shows you that balance. And one of the questions you had was, you know, are we almost exhausting the rural and remote lands? I think there's additional lands based on the 35-acre, rule in general, that that could go into transferable development rights. But one of the things that I want to remind you about is that you did a great job when you zoned it like you meant it, because every time someone comes in and says, I'd like to transfer a TDR off of this, we're not in there trying to convince them to do that, because the appropriate level of development can occur on that property. 1,000 square foot, cabin, if you will, is as much as you're going to get on a rural and remote piece of land, which is an appropriate zoning given what we went through when we looked at that. So I think we're covered in the sense that that we're getting what we want. We zoned it like we meant it in those backcountry areas, so we're seeing the level of development that's appropriate there. So there's no big fear overhanging, that we have to get rid of all those TDRs, if you will. And so that's when we started looking at TDRs as an additional tool for agricultural lands to a certain extent, when we could, using them in different ways through Dale's program and through the creation then of some of the conservation-oriented subdivisions, the historic, as Suzanne said, the limited, or the lots that were more marginal as far as development was concerned. So I think the rural and remote zoned lands are only they're one piece of the puzzle now, because we've expanded it such that we're getting TDRs off of those other types of properties. So I think rural and remote, while it's important, in my mind, that's kind of taken care of. We've sort of, we've zoned it like we meant it. We get the level of development that we think is appropriate there. If someone chooses the option of using a TDR, that's great, but if not, that's great, that's okay too, because 1,000 square foot cabin in most of those rural and remote locations works. So I think that that's only a part of the question I would ask. I would say, how many, are you generating the level of TDRs off of the other properties that you think is appropriate? Or have we gone too far with that? Should we tweak that? Does that result in homes in the rural part of the county larger than what we expected, more of those larger developments dispersed throughout the community? Originally, it had been thought that it was more the transfer of development rights would come into the urban growth boundary areas where services were available, utilities are available, and you don't have quite as big a demand on the services, including employment services and transportation, road impacts, that kind of thing out in the countryside. So I think really it's more of a question of, how are you comfortable with what you're seeing being generated off of properties that are not rural and remote, is what I would say. And Suzanne gave you some ideas there.
All right, thank you.
That was just one of your, I wrote down all your questions, but.
Yeah, a lot were just general comments
Yeah.
for the board to consider and weigh in on as well.
Well, also just to respond to the lower acreage sizes, when we set some of those sizes based on how many TDRs you could get, we were really trying to compete in a way with what could be done there to make it enticing enough to someone, to a certain extent, to a certain level, to make it enticing enough to tip you over to want to conserve the land and put TDRs on the property. So.
Yeah, thank you. Other thoughts or questions?
Sure.
Rachel?
I would echo George's comments that this is a well-prepared memo. It's kind of the information we need at hand to start to assess this. Seeing 330 TDRs issued to date, 164 used, leaves 166 out there, and then 118 that were described as approved sites but not yet pulled building permits, approved use, approved TDR receiver sites by planning area and things like that. So, it leaves a balance of about 48 TDRs on the market, potentially in the market or in somebody's portfolio, what they can hold as an investment or sell as they'd like to. So the program to me does seem to be in balance. I'm a little concerned about the idea of making much change. You know, it's kind of like when something's ain't broke, I don't want to fix it. And I know there's been some angst about the archaeological site and whether it should have gotten 2 TDRs or 1 TDR. And then that, of course, is why you end up with a 5-person board making decisions on things that are difficult. But I don't want to follow that other axiom that bad cases make for bad law. And I don't want to, sweep in too much because of that. I do think I would agree to and support further examination of the CD-PUD number of TDRs and just kind of check back in on that competitiveness element that Cindy talked about, of how that was originally crafted to be competitive enough. And we did just see one of those types of developments up the frying pan, sterilized a lot of land. But I would re-examine that and take a look at it and just see, is it, I don't know if it's 1 per 35 acres or it's 1 per 25 acres, or does it need to stay exactly where it is now? The other consideration I've had, and I know staff has heard me mention this before, and maybe it's just something that P&Z didn't have much interest in, but I'm wondering whether there's just too much general FAR available under the annual GMQS. It seems that there's 25,000 square feet in the rural area, and I don't think we've seen, quote, competing properties and someone turned down other than the fact that they didn't hit threshold in quite a while. And that just seems that number might be too high, and that would, with a lower annual amount available, both improve the quality of the competition and people submitting proposals, but potentially continue to sustain the demand for TDRs. And it's a real stray thought, and I don't know if it's valuable or not, but whether TDRs could ever be considered as mitigation for affordable housing. And, if that was something that we were doing, I mean, you are mitigating for growth impacts when you do a housing impact, and if you're eliminating growth impacts and housing demand by sterilizing land here that won't have a large second home that would demand employees, that there might be some consideration for that. I think it'd have to be very carefully structured in terms of, is it 2 TDRs per what size unit or what size employee generation, maybe only so many per the requirement of mitigation could be used, only some percentage of what the employee mitigation demand is. And I hesitate on that because I really just listened to a kind of lengthy discussion about how hard it is for the school district to retain teachers because of the cost of living and housing and not being able to settle in. But that is, when you talk about that, are there new uses that TDRs could, again, continue to sustain demand? So those are my general thoughts on the memo.
Without reiterating a lot, I'd like to have further discussions on a lot of what's been said. And I like the logic that you just brought up about the housing, and it does offset the need for housing by offsetting the extinguishing of development somewhere. So there is kind of a logical train to that. I think one of the big questions that was posed in here was, should we reduce maximum floor area size from 15,000 square feet to less, and George mentioned it. And I think one of the things that he said was, well, naturally it's kind of happening because there's less demand for it and people are more concerned with resources. And I'd have more discussion on that, but I think naturally it happening is a big reason why it's going to happen naturally anyway. There have been several cases with TDRs that have been brought up over the time that I've been here, almost 3 years now, that we've kind of, or at least I've felt that we've kind of hoped that there was a fractional TDR. And, what's a half TDR? You mentioned it. Do we do the one TDR? But I don't think that was the only scenario. I think there were some preservation TDRs given for historical structures at times where we said, well, I wish we could do 1.5 as opposed to 2. And then you get into that negotiation thing. And I think that's worth posing. And I think it could also be fairly... the curve on what those TDRs grant for square footage could be fairly aggressive. So, I mean, if one TDR is, 2,000 square feet or 2,500 square feet, a half TDR could be 800 square feet, or something that's more aggressive to extinguish them quicker, if that's the goal of the board. But it would create a way for someone to maybe want to use an extra half a TDR for just something small that they want to add to their house, and have the ability to extinguish them a little bit more rapidly. So I think that's a discussion worth having. And then I guess the question with the growth of where TDRs are landing, I think if we get more deep into that discussion, I'd really like to understand what specifically is inappropriate. Point to a house or something that said, well, they shouldn't have had the ability to have that extra TDR. Point to a community where some TDRs have landed and said, that community shouldn't have had those TDRs because of X, Y, and Z. To me, that's how I would frame that discussion, to understand, if we're going to change the program because we're not happy with where these TDRs are landing, well, let's have some very specific examples of what people mean when they're saying that.
Okay. Steve?
I agree with the idea of doing fractional TDRs. I had been looking at the benefit of somebody not wanting to build an extra 2,500 square feet, but if they wanted a smaller addition on their house, for instance, they can buy half a TDR for half the money and put on a smaller addition. That would encourage a little bit smaller houses, I think, because people, if they get the 2,500 extra square feet, they're going to build 2,499 square feet on. Somehow or other, they're going to figure that out to use it to the full extent. I also agree with you, Rachel, on the feeling that the CDPUD ratio is too many TDRs for what the benefit is, the 1 per 20 acres. And I don't know, I can picture some kind of an equation that you can equate what the benefit is to the landowner per TDR, and if those could somehow be balanced according to how much they're giving up and how much value in TDRs they're getting at, that could be the ideal thing, but I don't know if it would be possible to come up with such an equation. Just do it on mathematical basis, and you could apply a archaeological site or any other site to the same thing. If a person's giving up one house site, but they're getting to keep the land and use it for other purposes or whatever, there's these different values you can apply, and it makes the equation very hard to figure out. But if we could do that, that would be good. I like the ideas of finding other things that TDRs could be used for, because the complaint that you hear over and over is it just is encouraging more big houses in Pickens County, that we don't really want more big houses necessarily, but the idea of being able to use it to build a bigger barn, because some people would buy a TDR just to have a bigger barn for their horses or something, is an intriguing idea. or to build twice as many greenhouses as they would have been allowed under the guidelines, whatever guidelines we come up for on the greenhouses. Ideas like that would not have to do with building bigger houses, but building other things. The thought crossed my mind that if the program keeps going, sooner or later the land runs out. What if we still want TDRs for purposes? Where would we come up with TDRs? And just thinking outside the box, maybe TDRs could be given for the lease of water rights to put back in the rivers for a certain period of time, or some other values besides the land that a TDR could be given for. And that's looking maybe farther down the road because we're not out of the land that TDRs could be taken off of yet, but we will get to that point sooner or later. So that's all I have got for my thoughts right now.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about the health of the TDR program. I'm more concerned about the health of the county. And, you know, having worked in the construction industry and seen it essentially disappear, it's sort of like an 1892 all over again, where you have no construction. So most of the people that have worked with now are, you know, fixing somebody, just fixing, not adding somebody's bathroom or laundry room, and they're in tough straits. So, and if you look at this chart, the TDR program has mirrored exactly what's happened in the economy here. So you go from 2005, where you add 132,500 feet, down to 2012, where you added 7,500 feet. I mean, that seems to me to be, you know, a great mirror of how our economy has worked. I'm less concerned about large houses here because it's about a balance of, it's just we have to recognize where we are. We're in a resort area that people want to build large houses, and they have a range. And as Cindy pointed out, the 15,000 square foot is an exception to that range. It tends to be lower. And those large houses pay property tax. And then we have a large contingent of employee housing, which don't really contribute much property tax. And so you have to have a balance of those things, given our situation. You have to have a balance of allowing large houses within a range and expanding or sustaining your affordable housing program. And it seems to me the TDR program does that exactly. It allows expansion to large houses and sterilizes development in places we deem not appropriate or less appropriate. So I just don't see that the TDR program is actually driving anything here. I see it's responding to things, and it's responding in a way that the public accepts. People are, I think when you first proposed a transferable development right, people didn't know whether or not people would accept it. They have accepted it. And seeing the figures from 2012 sort of just drop off the charts here. I don't want a county that's 132,500 square feet per annum, but I also don't want a county that's at 7,500 square feet per annum of additional square feet. That's not a threat to anything here. You know, and the large house question really is less large houses, but where they're located, the impacts to their neighbors, the impact to the scenic view plane, and that kind of thing. And for the most part, the county, there's nothing egregious about our buildings here. They're well planned. I mean, if you look at McLean Flats, there's a new structure out there that's essentially invisible. So you know, the county's taking care of those things. So I'm much, much less concerned about tinkering with this program than I am with uplifting the county and uplifting the construction industry. I mean, it'd be like discussing ending mining in Aspen in 1892. Well, we should ban all mining. Well, the fact of the matter is, it fell off the charts because of the national economy and changes in the national economy. And our building here in this county has fallen off the charts because of the national economy. I just don't think the TDR is the essence of the problem here. The essence of the problem is, how do we keep our vitality as a resort? How do we keep it desirable? And how do we invite people to invest here? And from this thing I see in 2012, they're not investing. That's not good news for us. That's what we should be concerned with. Those are my views on the TDR.
Thank you. Rob, to get back to one of your questions in terms of some examples, when you talk about numbers of TDRs for CD communities or others, rather than use property names, we could use one example where there was, 20 TDRs that were given to a property with a serious constrained lot, and they received 1 TDR for every 20 acres, and the ability for them to actually build on that is questionable. So I think there's an example where, and similar to the example we had up the frying pan, I think that in both cases, they would have still preserved their property with the 1 TDR for 35 acres. So that's one example. In terms of...
Can I just be clear on what I was
Yes.
trying to express? I was more about the receiving sites than the generating sites. I understand, I'm willing to have the discussion of whether or not the generating sites are offering too much in the way of TDRs. I think we've seen that, and I think that discussion has happened a little bit. I'm more concerned with the receiving sites and having specific examples in that, mainly around the conversation of reducing the house size from 15,000 square feet lower. You know, where's the example that says that wasn't a good place? When we talk about doing away with the TDR program, we talk about we've got TDRs out there, and if we're not generating anymore, they become more valuable. Are we saying that we shouldn't generate more, or are we saying that we shouldn't utilize them more because they're not being utilized right? The generation, I'm in agreement with you. I think there are places where we're generating too many TDRs. It's the receiving sides that I'm not exactly clear on what may have been discussed. What I'm interpreting from other commissioners is that, you know, there are places that have received TDRs that probably it may not have been appropriate for them to receive the TDR, and I don't know where that is. Mm-hmm. So I don't understand that side of it.
Okay. So, thank you. My understanding was that the original intent of the TDR program was, again, to limit development in rural and remote zones by transferring those building rights pretty much into the UGB areas. And what's happened over the last 10 years or so is what we've seen is those development rights are not going into the UGB, but they're going into rural areas that really don't have the infrastructure and the services to sustain those large homes. And so we see a lot of large homes in rural areas that are becoming our second homes, our spec homes, sit vacant majority of the year. And in some instances, they're really just white elephants. So I like the idea that staff has posed in terms of other opportunities to utilize TDRs, and whether it's an idea in terms of affordable housing or guest houses in the UGB or long-term in terms of water rights. I think we have the opportunity to look at other opportunities versus just moving development rights from one area of the county to another area of the county, because that's all we're doing is just moving development rights and the ability to build. I know I've said this before, and I haven't really gotten much traction, but I'll continue to voice my opinion that I think that 15,000 square foot homes when that number was derived, it was somewhat of an arbitrary number, and it was derived because of when one huge development occurred, and all of a sudden the board at that time said, whoa, someone's just built a 50,000 square foot home, maybe we better come up with some guidelines. So a 15,000 square foot home was determined to be reasonable at that time, and that's how that number was obtained. I just think that, I don't think we're going to be inhibiting or deterring any construction business by dropping that number down from 15 to 10 or so. I think what it does for us as a county, it sends a message that in everything that we're doing in terms of trying to address lowering our carbon footprint and becoming more energy conscious, that this sends a message out to the broader community. I once heard a conversation about a very simple definition of what drives climate change, and the answer was, it's really just an excessive use of our resources. And to me, whether someone the industry is going to pursue continuing to look at building large homes or shrinking, it's still, the message is still an excessive use of our resources. So I think there's an opportunity to lower that threshold and still maintain the TDR program and look at other avenues as well. So that's why I posed that question in my comments. Rachel?
Yeah, I think everyone's bringing some really valuable points to the table. And thinking about it, I want to make sure, for me, having the TDR tool is incredibly important for us as a board when we go to constrained site hearings, and the ability to offer a form of compensation and beneficial use as opposed to being an outright taking, should there be a constrained site where you say nothing at all can happen on this. And so I want to make sure we don't lose that. And I don't, as we're expressing concerns with how the program has played out, not lose sight of the benefits that have been there. So that's an incredibly important aspect, and a reason, in my mind, to keep the program as balanced and balanced within the market, as Michael has kind of put it, as possible. I mean, it was a decision by the board that historic preservation should be a voluntary program, not a mandatory program, like the city of Aspen has for many of its older structures, and that, to make sure there really were enough incentives there, the ability to offer TDRs was added in. I still don't know what is that, potential of historic sites within the county that we would like to incentivize to rebuild and retain, and how many TDRs that would take. If it was, just as a single, assessment of our, eligible for historic designation list. But that's an important factor. I do think it's, just normal and routine to have reviews of this sort and do a little bit of brainstorming. And I find myself in an awkward position, Georgia, arguing the other side of the 15,000 square foot house, but it would take from your base allotment of 5750 4 TDRs to get up to 15,000 square foot. And if someone has a 35-acre parcel to begin with, and they've now sterilized, a minimum of, say, 80 acres somewhere else to condense that growth onto that 35 acres, that's not really unrealistic. I mean, and it's a lot less lights and driveways and other septic tanks and things like that would have been scattered around in various locations, and potentially fragmenting habitat and all sorts of other items. I understand, and I have the same visceral reaction sometimes when you say, oh, my word, look at that house, it's a mansion, it's a castle. Other times, you don't really see tacked to the mailbox that says, we sterilized 80 acres or 100 acres or something like this in order to be able to build this. You don't see what was preserved within that house, but it was. And the energy use of the other 4 lots that were sterilized, or whatever was sterilized, has been eliminated. And so I just think we need to look at that as a big picture of what really we get when people sterilize those. So I really have a hard time wanting, saying we should reduce the overall building limit size. I think we've talked about it a little bit before, but perhaps you set a threshold where your first 2 TDRs you purchase on the market will get you 2,500 square feet each. You're well over 10,000 square foot then. And if you want to go the rest of the way to 15,000, because that's your personal preference for your home that you're going to be buying, those final TDRs are worth less, and you end up using up some more TDRs to go from 10,000 up to 15,000 square feet or something like that. Because I think it just continuing the demand is an important component, and whatever we are to consider doing in the future, if we do anything at all, we're really going to need some market analysis, probably from outside of ourselves, about what this could or may do to the TDR market. There's a lot of holders of TDRs out there who've made a bargain. They thought there was a certain value to it, and they thought there was a certain ability to use it up. There are potential conservation and open space acquisitions that may require TDRs to perfect and to do. And so, as I kind of said earlier, I'm a little on the if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I would like to move very, very cautiously and be able to have some independent analysis by, I don't know if you get economic majors to do that, or I don't know if it's mitigation impact folks or whatever, to say, what would this effect be? Maybe you end up with a few 15,000 square foot homes, and people settle on 12,000, and it's no big deal at all. Maybe it is. And so I would want advice that's not self-generated, I guess is the best way to say it, that I can trust of some pros and cons from others. So that's my thinking on those things, and you can cover my notes here.
Cindy?
We have done some of those studies, if you remember.
In the past.
We were just talking about Robbie Robinson and work that he did for us, looking at the economic values and trying to come up with those at the time. But it might be a good time to
Update.
bring that back, update it a little bit if you think that's important. Something we could do.
Dale?
Well, just maybe a kind of footnote on this whole question about trying to figure out the right number of TDRs for a given landowner to incentivize conservation you're trying to promote. Of course, at open space, we look at everything through the lens of choosing the right number of dollars instead of the right number of TDRs, and there it's customary to do that based on an appraisal of what it is you're after. We've had several successful projects which were hybrid TDR projects and open space dollar projects, where we were able to get to those increments of, if you needed 1.5 TDRs to equal the value of the thing that you want the private owner to let go of, and you can't split your TDR, then you do it with a TDR plus some open space dollars. So some of those projects have worked well, particularly where the thing that the county's pursuing is also something that the open space charter and the open space board both would concur needed to be protected. A great example is the bracket parcel up on top of the Crown that was a hybrid project like that. That approach hasn't worked as well in situations like the archaeological site, where we were really outside the authorization of the charter regarding the dollars. But I'm excited about these projects that can be one or the other or hybrid projects, and we really enjoy working with the ComDev staff on those things.
Okay. Staff, you have any other
Well,
thoughts
the
or
only
comments
other thing-
based on the conversation so far?
Yeah, the only other thing that to kind of keep in the mix is that through your caucus programs and recommendations from the caucus groups, you've allowed the caucus groups to say pretty much what's then been translated through their master plans and land use plans to say, in this area, we really think 8250 is okay. In this area, we really think 15,000 is okay. In this area, we really think it's you know, it's, I think now they're all,
4,000.
well, that used to be the frying pan. I thought they were 4,000 and went up to 57.
Accessory structures.
Yeah. So they had an adjustment. But the point is that you did take a specific look with the master plans and the caucus areas of what they feel is a good indication of their values within their drainages. Now, there's only a few places that really say, yeah, bring it on, you know, the Owl Creek and the Starwood area, and some places like that that are okay with 15,000 square foot houses. So there is a little bit more of a limited place for those in the valley. But it doesn't mean that the numbers are correct if you're seeing that either from the demand or from the location.
And there's really no correlation to lot size in those cases. I mean, Rachel talked about 35 acres, but a lot of these cases, they're much, much smaller, so there's, you know, it's not really apples to apples in terms of saying, well, we can allow X amount of building at a substantially large parcel of land versus what you would find normally in a UGB, which would be much smaller lot sizes.
Well, that gets into the growth management equation of the 5750, but we don't allow someone to go above and beyond what their FAR would allow them.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, George, I wasn't distinct between rural areas and urban growth boundary areas, but I think that to really have a more detailed discussion, if this is going somewhere, we need some maps to really look at the UGB, because I don't know how much land is really left in the UGB if you start saying, okay, no TDRs can be used for, you know, to achieve these larger heights behind a certain limit or height FAR. And then we'd like to see them all used up within the UGB. I think you know, we start to talk to the city of Aspen as a caucus group about how they feel about that, you know, that we're going to concentrate all the county's growths in these areas to the protection of the rural areas. You know, I think that there's been a balance with some of the TDRs protecting rural areas, used up in rural areas, and others concentrated within the city. But, you know, I don't really know how many or much of the remaining landing sites are left to use TDRs within the UGB before it hits its build out. And I think that that's an important component of this discussion. You know, it seems like everyone should have a fair share of the benefits. Everyone should have a fair share of the impacts. And I certainly wouldn't want to, you know, limit the program or, you know, the potential house sizes beyond what the caucus groups have already said, or to the detriment and say, well, all the impacts go in the city, and, you know, if you drive up this draw or that draw, avoiding the private roads and private driveways, you can see undisturbed land that was created through the 15,000 square foot home you have, you know, in your immediate vicinity now. I mean, this is, we can't get it out of proportion to the idea that city residents are county residents too, and they're not necessarily opening their doors to take. I mean, there was a long, long time ago when this program first started, when people started thinking, well, maybe the city would allow county TDRs to land within city limits. And, you know, the city, when I was mayor, we actually lowered the house sizes to create a little room for people to land TDRs and maybe, you know, benefit our own city historic preservation program and such, but it was immediately repealed by the administration. And so the city is very sensitive about how much of our loading we want to do in the EUGB.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that we exclude rural areas. And as Cindy says, there's 3 caucus areas down valley that have restricted their FARs, and it's been adopted and codified by the P&Z.
Yeah.
I just think that some of there's opportunities as we look down the road for future use of those TDRs. I think staff has thrown out some ideas and suggestions, whether guest houses could be used or whether you no longer exempt the 4,000 square foot basement, you include that, so there's opportunities to keep that TDR program thriving. Michael?
Yeah, but I think we're still missing the point, which is what we should be talking about is our economy. Not a TDR program that's actually not encouraging any growth here. There's no growth here. That's a real problem. So what do we do? And it's not adjusting the downsizing our house size and letting people, because I don't think that actually has any practical effect, because people aren't building those houses anyway, so why are we talking about it? People aren't using TDRs, period, right now. Well, they're just not using them.
You know, Michael, I don't want to seem like I'm disagreeing with you, but I'm not sure I can...
It wouldn't be unusual.
It wouldn't be unusual, but I'm not sure I draw the same conclusion from that one chart, because I think a lot of the permitted growth that was going to use TDRs did not actually use them in the year it was allotted. And we're starting to see a number of building permits come through now and being used now in projects like that.
If the economy is going up, that's fine with me.
Yeah,
That's just a
right,
technical argument.
I know, but beyond that, I think there's a point at which returning to a real estate construction economy being above and beyond our other economic aspects is not a stable place to be. And someday all the lots will be built, whether you do it all fast or you do it slow, and we're going to be back to a remodel and scrape and rebuild process. But I don't know that we wouldn't be building our back of our economy on a construction industry that is not really a sustainable economy. The real estate trading up and trading down is not necessarily the best economy. And that's part of why we were so vulnerable during the recession, and so many people lost their jobs because they were dependent on the go-go boom years of a construction economy. And I just don't want to see us return to that as saying that's even more important than tourism, which it does start to run into some conflicts with that. And based on the most recent reports of how well the top 1% and the top 5% have recovered from the economic downturn versus the middle class and the lower class, I don't think we're going to run out of interested folks who will invest in our community as long as we keep the community a valuable place to invest in and a balanced place to invest in. So well, I don't have the same economic concern.
And I'm not promoting a construction boom again. I'm just saying, listen, we should consider what is a sustainable economy. Yeah. That's what we should be talking about. This is not directly doesn't directly affect that, quite frankly, because it isn't being used right now, even given your technical argument. So that's what we should be talking about: is how do we have a sustainable economy going forward? I think probably it does include construction, it does include tourism, and how do we make it attractive? The discussion about limiting house sizes or limiting TDRs, I think, actually puts a damper on those things, and it's not a creative discussion, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I agree 100% with you, Michael, but in the sense of kind of brainstorming ideas that potentially might be changes to the TDR program, the brainstorming of the ideas is the first step. The second step is doing some sort of analysis and awareness of how it affects our economy. If we do this, what does that mean to our building? And I wouldn't vote for any changes without that type of analysis being done. And I do think that I would heavily weigh, not 100%, but I would heavily weigh its effects on the overall balance of our economy. And the balance of our economy and everything that we've done, in my opinion, in this county, it takes effects on a lot of things. Protecting the water, that balances our economy. Protecting our open space, that balances our economy. All of those things balance our economy. Extinguishing land, development rights, balances our economy to some extent. Sure, you have to balance that with, there's a carpenter that's not building a home on that site, so that's also part of our economy. And a home isn't being built that's bringing someone in who's going to ski, eat, partake in all the activities here and spend their hard-earned dollars here. So that balances our economy. And then coming back to one of the things that I brought up, which I think would be a positive impact to stimulating the construction side of things, as well as accelerating and extinguishing various development rights, would be that fractional TDR piece. If I think we're talking the millionaires, not the billionaires in these types of circumstances, but if somebody's got a 5,000 square foot house and they want to build another 1,000 square feet onto it, they might not want to buy a full TDR. They might not want to build 2,500 square feet, but they might have within their millionaire budget, not billionaire budget, they might have the means and the desire to spend to build 1,000 extra square feet and to buy half a TDR at less than a full TDR, therefore making it worthwhile for them to do that, as opposed to it being cost inhibitive for them to buy a full TDR to only buy 1,000 square feet, and then therefore not getting the full value of it, or buying a full TDR and trying to build another 2,500 square feet at, $1,500 a square foot. Those are big numbers, and it doesn't apply to everybody in this county, but that's stimulating our construction economy by allowing that type of development to happen where it's appropriate. So I do think that that's very much a part of this discussion, and I don't think any of the other, in my opinion, I don't think any of the other commissioners are ignoring it. I just think this is the brainstorming session to come up with the ideas of what to change, and then we have to really dive into how does this affect our economy.
One of the questions I posed earlier, I just want to get the board's input on this or feedback, is have a consistent program when it comes to historic structure. So for example, one case we gave one TDR to restore a historic structure. In the other case, right next door, we gave 3 TDRs. Is there a thought in terms of some consistency, or just continue to look in that base by base and try to determine if that applicant is serious about preserving their site, or just looking for an opportunity, and if that doesn't work, they'll scrape and replace it?
I would think, to the extent that we can come up with a consistent program, it would have to be somewhere along the lines of like a scoring system, because you can't really say that one, foundation that's already falling down that we want to have preserved because it was some specific thing in our history here, matches another which is visible from a road or this or that, even though they're the same square footage. And so I think you have to have kind of a matrix system of a number of different criteria that creates a range of scoring systems that may be used to guide us in the value decision of TDRs. But I agree with you 100%. A lot of times, the number one question that I think staff has asked in those discussions is, what's the precedent we set, on previous decisions? And does this, change the precedents that we're setting on various things, or is it in line with what we've done before?
Well, just relative to that, Rachel had asked earlier, I thought I heard her ask earlier for us to go back and take a look at our inventory that we have. It doesn't mean that we have everything, but we do have an inventory of historic structures. Earlier boards had determined that we would do a voluntary system, but it doesn't mean that we couldn't rank various properties relative to we have threshold properties, like in the Redstone area, we have a couple of threshold properties. And then we have properties that are eligible, and then we have properties that aren't quite as significant kind of thing. There's no reason we couldn't look at some kind of a scoring range, kind of a system based on our inventory that might help you with some consistency in that approach. But it's a tough one, because a value to a site can be very localized to that neighborhood versus the overall value to the community for that era. It could have a lot to do with character. I think it's just going to be a tough one, but it doesn't mean we can't look at it and bring it back to you.
Rachel, then Michael?
Yeah, I will be happy to look at something, but I, like Rob, think there's probably so many factors that it's going to be hard to say one and no more. Or this is actually where I like the idea of a half, because there are some parcels in the past where I thought, well, one is too little and two is too much. Which do I choose? You know, but the condition of the home when the restoration is starting, and have they maintained the historic character? I think one of the two examples we saw there had already gone forward and done a lot of work that was totally not within the historic guidelines and codes, and they had to be ripping things out, and it was a little more of a mess, and they're asking to get rewarded for not having done the right things in the first place and needing to redo them to qualify for even any TDRs. So I like the idea of looking at the priority properties that we'd like to see on the inventory and preserved. I think the condition of the home to begin with, if you're talking about a structure that's been abandoned and boarded up for 20 years, you're dealing with a much different project than one that still had continual occupation. And the other element, what was I thinking, of were they going to do an addition on the home side, or are they preserving the other features of the ranch property? Or not. You know, there's just a lot of factors, and it gets really hard to make something homogeneous out of that mix. The one thing I particularly remember discussions back when Jack Hatfield was on the board was Jack wanted to make it so that once that party sold the TDR, they had to put it in the home. They had to put it in home construction, or they had to show us receipts or something to show how it preserved the historic resource. And we all said, no, I mean, they've made commitments about what they need to do, but we can't tell them that they can't sell it today and pay for their kids' college education with it because they already sank $200,000 into trying to save the home. You know, it's just that is a financial incentive. People have made obligations. It runs with the land, it runs with the deed of the house whenever they go to sell it. But you really can't necessarily direct every last penny from the sale of the TDR into, you've got to redo the potato barn now, you know. So I'd love to standardize a little more, but I also think it's a big challenge.
Michael?
Yeah, I can understand the quest to standardize, but quite frankly, I like the haggling. I like the ability for that applicant to come forward with us and to have to compete for a really good presentation of what was the first transaction of that house, when was it homesteaded, who was it sold to, then who was it sold to, then what did they add on to that house, and then who was it sold to after that. I mean, just learning those histories, it seems to me, is valuable. The question of the condition of the house also is oftentimes the house in most disrepair is the oldest house and has the most historic significance because it's the last of its kind. So that's those are, I mean, I suppose they could quantify those, but I think you're much better off letting the applicant quantify it and say, listen, this particular architecture is significant to the county because it's the only one left of its kind, even though it's in bad condition, and therefore we should preserve it. And I can think of some close to my place that are exactly that way, that every winter that goes by, I'm surprised that the structure's still standing, and I would like to see it preserved. And it's unique. So I don't think, I mean, I would like to go over with Susanna Reed exactly what they look at, because quite frankly, there isn't a structure that Susanna Reed wouldn't preserve. So I would like to go over again and see what those values are, but I think the discretion should be ours, and the competition should be in the applicant's hands. And once we start making it a standardized thing, we're just going to miss out on some opportunities, it seems to me.
So we're just about out of time. What I've heard, at least initially for staff to work on is to come do a study or research more in terms of the ratio of current TDRs going towards CDPUDs and constraining lots. Looking at the opportunities, pros, cons, ability to look at fractional TDRs. In terms of historic sites, to perhaps get a list of priorities of properties and get an idea in terms of how the historic staff person looks at values. What else did I miss? Anything else I missed for staff to?
Potential of TDRs for AH?
Potential for TDRs for affordable housing or some of the other ideas that I think you started with, guest houses.
And then the water.
Yeah, just future opportunities.
Accelerated number of TDRs for bigger houses.
Yeah. So I think there were some good ideas that were presented.
I think that's all. I trust Lance has got anything else that's...
I got 1, 2, 3, 4. I got like 7 things written down here. I think I have them all.
So that was a good starting point, good discussion, I think. Where do we go from here? Okay, thanks, guys.
This wasn't for public, right?
No, for
Did you want any
taking...
additions?
No, this was a work session, but we're going to keep on moving here.
I'll be back in a minute, just please go ahead.
Okay, let's see. Let's take a 5-minute break since I've lost 2 of my commissioners here.
Good idea, George.
For you, but
Future agendas?
yeah, future agendas. Two main concerns. The first is identifying some times for recreational marijuana workshops. I had a chance to visit with John Hewley, and right now we have 2 dates identified. Rachel, if I remember correctly, one of these may be a challenge for you, but October 1st, what we're looking at doing is having a hour and a half set aside from 2 to 3:30, moving our break to 3:30 or 3:45, and just compressing our time a little bit. We tend to get through our MOIs and board reports and such a little bit quicker usually. So we thought we could find an hour and a half there. I think that's a time when everyone's going to be present. The one that I couldn't tell from what I had, Rachel, was the other time would be to look at October 17th, which is a Thursday. You guys are scheduled to be hosting the EOTC meeting at that point, which I believe starts at 4. It's looking at maybe pulling a 2 to 3:45, or we could even start at 1 and just have a larger block if we think we're going to need it. We could probably make that determination on the 1st, see how far we get in that discussion.
Yeah, that schedule works fine with me. It was Thursday, November 14th that I cannot because of the QQ meeting.
Does that work for everybody else?
Sure.
They're coming a little early on the 17th?
So we'll go ahead and block out times to do the recreational marijuana discussions then. And then I think we'll see where we're at after October 17th, and we can start to look at, do we need to grab another time into November past where some of our future agendas are going right now. But 3 hours may give us enough time to really sort through it.
Okay, and anybody else have anything on for future agendas? No? Okay.
The only other thing we had related to future agendas is we do on October 1st, have our joint meeting with the U.S. Forest Service coming up, and we just wanted to take a few minutes and see if there were some topics that you would want us to be considering for that meeting, put an agenda together.
Okay, board? Rachel?
I would love if they could give us a little bit of the overview of how much this summer's firefighting budget impacted their regular operations and maintenance budget. And do they foresee, what do they see in the future budget coming up for summer 2014?
Steve?
Well, I'd like to get an update on the Mitchell Creek, their investigation into the Mitchell Creek Road.
Other, Rachel?
I think it might be helpful, if other board members agree, of course, but an update on their potential new Forest Service administrative facilities on 7th and Main now that they've gone forward with the land auction, and what do they see as the course forward on that?
Yeah, that would be interesting.
And then I don't know if Ellen or Cindy have issues for us that they'd like us to bring forward that are more, policy oriented.
Yeah, and I asked John to reach out and see whether Scott Fitzwilliams would be available as well, especially looking at some broader issues regarding the White River as a whole.
Okay.
Okay, that'll get us started.
That's all I had on future agendas.
All right, good. So we're on to open discussion.
Okay, well, we've got two large open discussion items for you. I think what we want to do is start off with an update on the AABC projects. And we have GR and Brian here for that.
Thanks, John. Again, I'm GR Fielding, the county engineer, and I'm serving as the county's project manager on the ABC project and the county's owner's representative on the underpass project. We'll start with the underpass between the ABC and the airport. We've discussed with the board several times about the contractor being behind schedule. Despite seeing an increase in working staff on the project, a lot of the laborers and operators, we have still decided to go forward with requesting a formal recovery plan from the contractor so that they can line out their methods and means of catching back up. The reason for this is the milestones in which were set in the contract aren't arbitrary, but they are fairly well set by Mother Nature in our valley. So we've seen in the last 2.5 weeks, 2/3 of the project management staff either leave or be replaced on the project. Moving forward, we are anticipating seeing it 2-shift work, meaning that they will have people pouring concrete in the morning and afternoon, and another crew come in for evening work and do forming and tying rebar. That's what we're anticipating seeing. They have until Friday to reply to us, and we'll update the board when if we have any significant news there. One thing that
I'm sorry, were you done on that or not?
with the underpass, the traffic shift that we'll be seeing, we're anticipating now at the end of this month.
That was my question, because the last time we heard from you that it was imminent they were going to switch over, so now it's the end of this month is 2 weeks from now?
Yes, they've decided to change the method of their construction, and that's dictated that date move back.
Yeah, I mean, when I drive in every day on the bus and I look over there, it looks like they're not even close to shifting over to the other side.
We're working hard with the with the contractor to get these plans, get their plans for how they're going to catch up on this project, because we are, we're concerned that we've got, winter weather coming up, and we need to get the road straightened out before the snow starts falling.
So the worst case scenario may be that they clean up one side of the road, they don't even get a chance to even start on the other side, but they get the roads set for winter?
I think that's a bit more extreme than what we're looking at right now as a worst case scenario. In our meeting that ended, actually probably hasn't ended yet, we were discussing the use of different materials that can be placed during winter to carry mainline traffic, but having the box open. That's one of their milestones, is to have the pedestrian underpass functioning for winter. And that's set because we have BRT stops that are now going to be shifted, and those don't work quite as well if we don't have the underpass where it's going in.
But the BRT stations really can't even begin to start to build those until the highway's cleared up.
That's correct. We have one BRT stop that's begun, and that's on the Down Valley stop. The one for the Up Valley stop, they have to complete some of the retaining walls behind where the stop's going to be that have, the path that comes up from the underpass. And so that's what we're working through with the contractor right now, is all those types of logistics to make sure that everything's functioning.
Yeah, I guess my other concern is that we get those BRT sites in, and the underpass really is only 60 or 70% done, and they still have to work on it. And it's in such a state of construction that it's not going to be easily usable, and people won't use it, and all of a sudden you've got pedestrians who are actually even further out of place from the BRT than the current stops.
Well, and that's, this is one of the reasons that we partnered with RAFTA the way that we did on the project management side, because it provides some continuity in coordinating these two key infrastructure projects. So all these needs are being taken under consideration in one project management structure instead of multiple. So it's not, the RAFTA folks are aware of both of these needs, and we're pushing the contractor to make sure that both are functional. And so we believe we're going to get there. We're just trying to be candid with you guys that we're not as far along as we'd like to be at this point. We believe we're going to meet the critical milestones still, but we're having to push pretty hard to get there.
Rachel, Rob?
Yeah, I'm not confused, but I feel a little bit like Brian and GR get to be the bearer of bad news, but RAFTA is managing and coordinating this project. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And so I know I've mentioned to John during the course of the summer, those guys, making their when are we going to see some real movement here? And I'm sure others have raised it as well. But, has RAFTA been able to put the hard look into this portion of their larger projects the way they should to get the road back in place for this winter?
We, as staff, have been actually very happy working with RAFTA staff. Their contract is set up similar to ours in construction. Up front on a contract, you don't have a lot of means and methods to push a contractor along. Everything is a disincentive on the tail end. Now that they're starting to be able to smell that in the air. The flavors enter their mouth. I don't know what metaphor to use there, but they're realizing it's starting to become imminent, that they're coming up against milestones. It's really on the contractor's side where that performance happens.
Okay. If I could just a small follow-up, because I have worried a little bit about this, but is there a point at which a contractor starts saying, you know, I've got all these penalties, I'm never going to make the project anyhow, and they practically abandon the project, you know? I mean, is there any possibility where they just, you know, stop caring because they're going to lose money on the job anyhow because all the penalties will come into play?
Not on a project of this size. This is, you know, this is a $5.4 million contract, plus RAFTA puts it in almost to 6.5.
Okay.
So they're not going to walk on that project. It's going to be, it would be a huge black mark on their continued employment in Colorado.
Okay.
The state of Colorado is involved here. This is purely a contractor performance issue that has caught up to them. We have the vice president coming in today to see the site. We're hoping to get him involved now, but you know, with the milestones and the liquidated damages we have in place, we're going to take care of the project. There may be some pain through this winter. It won't be fully complete. All the polishes won't be put on the different aspects of the underpass, but I think people will be able to walk under the road safely, and the road will be put in its correct alignment. Come springtime, we may be ripping that road back up and replacing it, depending on what method they put in this fall. But I think we'll get the job done, and they won't walk on this one. This is too important to them.
Thank you.
Rob? Yeah, two things. One, this is a tough thing to talk about too, but are we taking the proper measures to protect the disincentive things that they have? I mean, I know there are different things, like if they find a rock that's bigger than this, they get an extra day or whatever. And I mean, we should be documenting everything to protect whatever disincentives they have for those liquidated damages, to make sure that our ducks in a row when we do get to that negotiation at the end on what they may or may not owe.
Right. The contract is written through RAFTA, and because of the BRT stops, the job is a federal job. And as such, we have staff employed for the project whose job it is to track paperwork. And that's what they do all day long, literally, between this and the BRT job that RAFTA is completing. So,
and then the other point that I wanted to bring up was with a discussion with the airport approving some funding for some realignment of pedestrian crosswalks and whatnot. And I just want to make sure that you guys are coordinating fully with them regarding when the transition happens from it being above ground 82 cross to a below ground 82 cross, and make sure that their alignments of whatever work that they're doing direct people not towards that old crosswalk and towards the new crosswalk, without any confusion that is no longer a way to cross 82.
right. And we've met with the airport staff both last Thursday and today to discuss that. And so it's ongoing, and we're going to coordinate that with them for sure. Thank you.
Other questions on this, Michael?
Well, just a response to Rachel, I mean, the project for RAFTA is a $46 million project. And essentially, this is the last piece of that project. So I can guarantee you that RAFTA is paying close attention to this, because it's essentially makes their program successful or not successful if they finish by this fall. So, however, and I told ACRA this, construction is nasty and dirty and unpredictable and awful. And so it's actually hard to judge. I mean, these guys are the best judge of it. We're behind. That happens in construction. It's unfortunate. But, I mean, all I can say is the best minds available are working on this project. The best minds at RAFTA, and the best minds at the county, and the best minds at CDOT. And that's just the way it is. So, and I can guarantee you that this project is so important to RAFTA that nothing is going to stand in the way of completion of this project.
Okay.
Okay.
On to the next problem.
Well, the ABC construction. Let me dive into a couple details of what we've completed recently, and then we'll discuss. The board has received several emails from some citizens out there regarding some of the tree removal, and we can get into those details. As I've brought up before, our pond is really close to complete. It's functioning right now. All of our pipe is tied together. We have pond is completely dug out, and our outlets down to the river. We have all of our stormwater management best practices in place until we have everything seeded and vegetated back.
Is water flowing into the pond now?
Yes. Not much is getting out, but it's getting in, which is actually a really good sign. The Baltic Avenue, or the 500 Road, this morning we completed the concrete work, so we have a open and connected sidewalk corridor that moves from the Stein Trail past the row houses, past Aspen Sprouts, past Columbus Architects and Cornerstone Project Management, past Roxy's, all the way up to State Highway 82. We've started our work on the back 400 Road and the 300 Road. We have started our work on the 100 Road. Those things all go actually pretty fast. It's pretty quick removal, grade, and put concrete back. We're looking at paving in a few weeks out there. They're still negotiating with their paving sub exactly what date that's going to be. So that's the gist of that work.
So JR, I'm sorry. So last time you came before us, you said that some of that work probably wouldn't be completed this fall because of the work that the Aspen Water District was doing?
Aspen Consolidated Sanitation District. And
yes.
Yeah, we're still, we don't believe that we'll be able to finish the 200 Road, which is the road that goes past Comcast, 209 ski.com building, accesses the Holy Cross substation. Our latest estimate for completion of work from Aspen Consolidated Sanitation District has actually moved back into October. So we just continue it's an ongoing conversation with our contractor there about what will be what we will consider in the scope that must be done this year versus what they just don't have access to the road to complete at this time.
So does that mean, I know it was concerned by one of the owners for the ski.com building that the way that is graded now, that they continue to get flooded out and iced up in the wintertime. So they'll go through that, those same issues for this coming winter?
Unfortunately, I do think that might be a consequence. One thing that we've kept on the table with our contractor, however, is trying to get the regrading of the corner of the 200 Road completed. But what we're up against is them demobilizing out and then keeping one piece of equipment and someone there to do, one small piece of work versus remobilizing in next year to complete that.
And have you communicated with those property owners that will be impacted by this?
Yeah, I've talked to Steve and Mark about that, and we need to continue that conversation to get into those sorts of details.
All right, thank you.
But speaking of the 200 Road, the email that you received regarding the tree removal is mostly, from what I could discern of those pictures, was of the 200 Road. The issue that we have, I guess, ABC-wide, is a lot of the plantings that were done there were done after the utility work, and a lot of them are on top of the utilities. What we saw actually was, lo and behold, a lot of the best growing trees were right on top of ACSD's sewer line. And Aspen Consolidated Sanitation District had to do a pretty significant tree removal to replace their line because these trees have been planted on top of what was existing there and had been planted since they put that line in originally in the 70s. Other parts of our removals we discussed with the board, but to go up to the 200 Road specifically, some of the tree removal that was of concern is things that need to be completed in order to get traffic around the work that needs to be done. That work is being done under a license agreement with us. It's been permitted. It's part of the utility coordination that we have ongoing out there. The sewer line that they're replacing gets up to 14 feet deep. And obviously you need to have traffic so far away from that excavation to be safe, so you don't have a trench collapse. one of the trees that needed to be removed so that we could get traffic literally past the project. Unfortunately, replacement wasn't necessarily considered when they put these utilities in late 60s and early 70s, and that unfortunately has come due now, and that's the impact that we're seeing. On a global scale, again, for the project in the ABC, we started with a proposal of 120 tree removal or something pretty big number like that. The board challenged staff to go back with their consultants and lower that number, and I think we got down into the 60s or somewhere in there for a complete project. To date, I think that we're less than 20. Our goal is somewhere in the 30 neighborhood. I know just along the 500 road alone, we saved, I think, 7 or 8 trees in front of the row houses. We moved the road, literally, to save 7 trees in front of people's houses. So we are trying to be as environmentally conscious as we possibly can. Try to save where practical. Other problem is a lot of these planters that trees are planted in are within the county's right-of-way. And those were done either at the time or before we adopted the roads. And when we adopted the roads, kind of got it as is. And we're dealing with that as part of the problem right now as well. And as we move down the 300 road, I think that that's going to be a continued challenge because that's probably one of the denser areas that we have for that. But we're going to go at it the same way that we have the rest of the project and literally go block by block and planter by planter and see what we can do and be innovative and try to save all of these.
Okay, any questions on that? Michael?
Well, I just wanted to thank you for that explanation because I think when people, again, construction is dirty and nasty and just awful. And so when people see that, they think it's random, they think it's on purpose, they don't understand the challenges that you guys face, and you've made it clear that there are a lot of challenges out there. And I appreciate you making that clear.
Thank you.
I would just ditto Michael's comments. I think they're very well said. My question is there a replanting budget or revegetation budget either with us or with Aspen Consolidated Sanitation District? Not immediately over their pipelines this time, but perhaps to the side or perhaps some smaller growing bushes and things like that.
Yes, and it's kind of a...
Can't do it till spring, so.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different pieces within that. We do have a budget. We have a budget for seeding. We have a budget for landscaping, and we have... we are going to try to enlist some help from open space for some of the areas that impacted the open space. We have partnered with Aspen Consolidated Sanitation District to talk to individuals that will be part of the revegetation, because down near the pond is pretty significant cuts, and we had 2 huge utility cuts come down one of the hills that needs to be revegetated, and our work zones were adjacent. So we want to have the same subcontractor come in and do that. So when we say in 2 years, if we need to warranty the work, that we don't have finger pointing at that time. Unfortunately, up on the roads where we've added sidewalk, we don't have the template anymore or green space to plant big trees. And that's one of the reasons why we're prioritizing trying to save as many of the bigger trees as we can. That being said, the appropriateness of placing trees around the ABC is difficult, and we're trying to identify some of the places that don't interfere with the power lines that go into Holy Cross, that aren't right on top of one of our roads. It's a challenge, but we do have the budget, and we do plan on addressing a number of those.
Maybe we could take some of those planters from the airport that they aren't using for there in the short term. Movable trees.
Is that it? John?
George, I'd just add, because obviously we're at a point in these projects where we're working through challenges, and as Michael's pointed out, you always have these kinds of challenges. Yeah, I'd just point out that between these 2 projects, these are probably 2 of the most complex projects we've taken on in the last 7-10 years, Brian, if not more. And so it's not completely unexpected that we're going to have some challenges and that we're going to have some bumps in the road on our way to but will end up being a successful project one way or the other. So I just wanted to put into context that these types of things happen when you're managing large, complex projects. We're working through it, and we're going to find a way to have successful projects both places.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Brian, if you see Ron and them out there, will you tell them that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have a few more staff joining us. I wanted to talk to the board a little bit about mutual aid requests and how as staff we're trying to organize to respond to those. And of course what we're talking about is the mutual aid kinds of requests that we're receiving for communities impacted by the flooding on the Front Range. And while I'm sure, and Alex and if you guys come on up, you can just join the conversation. I'll hand off to you guys at some point here. I think Valerie McDonald might be, she joining us?
She should be. She's
okay.
on her way.
So at any rate, I'm sure you guys have all seen this, but I think it just bears repeating for context. Right now, there are 20 counties on the Front Range that are impacted by flooding, covering a land area approximately the size of Delaware is the estimate now, and those flood impacts continue to move from east to west as the water.
West to east, right?
West to east is what I meant to say. It'd be a significant event if it were moving up. Even more. At any rate, so we have 20 counties. The event is still very, very much in progress. When we have these events in counties, typically individual counties will stand up emergency operations centers, and each of those emergency operations centers are going to have emergency support function leads. We have that in this county. The counties impacted have that. And as this event started ramping up, part of what those ESFs do is they have a resource list and they start reaching out, trying to get the resources that they need to help manage the events in their community. And so when this event started ramping up, we started getting requests from individual EOCs, individual counties, and we responded to those requests. Valerie and Alex, who have joined us here, went over and worked in Boulder and Jefferson counties, EOCs, as in emergency management functions. We currently have Nan Sundin and Mitzi Lettingham in Boulder's EOC, providing support for human services and housing. And this weekend, I started getting a lot more calls. Weld County, continued calls from Boulder and whatnot. And what quickly happened is these individual EOCs got overwhelmed with the size and scope of the event. And so now the resources are really moving and being distributed by the state EOC and FEMA. And so part of what I wanted to talk to you about today is how we're responding now locally and make sure that you're okay with the path that we're headed down, because there will be some resource dedication required, and probably not just in the short term from the county. And so today we actually stood up at our own incident command. Valerie's our incident commander on that, and I'll turn it over to her in just a second. But the goal of the incident command was to organize all of our emergency support function leads in the county. Many of those are county employees and county departments. Many are coming from outside agencies, and so, for example, you'll have search and rescue with Mountain Rescue, law enforcement being coordinated. I think Snowmass is actually our ESF lead on that through Brian Olson. We have EMS and hazmat. We have basically it's 15 ESF functions that we pulled together in the county today. The direction I gave county staff was that I want proposals to Valerie by Thursday for how we can provide support for the next 3 months for our counties on the Front Range, with the idea that we can't leave ourselves bare, but we may have to have some sacrifice in service levels or operational changes in order to accommodate us taking on some level of operational support. And I'll talk a little bit about the requests that I've had and then turn it over for the rest of it. Operational support, even if it's 1 day a week for the next 3 months or what have you. But areas that I'm anticipating we're going to get requests for, and they're going to be broad ranging because they've already come to me. There's going to be need for obviously road and bridge kind of assets when the event finally clears to a point where they can start moving debris and trying to open roads. We're going to continue, we're getting immediate asks right now for more human service and housing kind of resources. We're pretty maxed out there at this point, as we've sent a third of our department right now. We're going to see requests for appraisers, finance people, building inspectors, environmental health, public health, and you can name just about every major function, law enforcement. Those are going to be the scope of services that are needed, and hopefully you'll support our trying to do some plans to provide assistance to our sister counties on the Front Range. Valerie, as incident commander, stood up all the ESFs, and so basically all the ESF leads agreed today to follow the county's lead in coordinating for that same kind of 3-month period what resources we can coordinate as a community, and to work those through Valerie and through the state EOC. And Valerie, if you want to talk a little bit about how we're doing that and what the steps are, what that looks like going forward, that'd be great.
Basically, having been down there and witnessed what was going on, it's abundantly clear that they've exhausted their local resources. They did that probably 4 days ago. Any mutual aid agreements they might have had, they've exhausted those. At that point, they reach out to the state for resource ordering. And what we are doing by standing up our incident management team is we're developing a way to manage our assistance and resources to the event. So, as John was saying, people were reaching out. ESF 6, our sheltering person, maybe the person in Jefferson County was reaching out personally to our sheltering person here, or maybe Public Works was reaching out personally, and it just started to get out of control quickly. So what we've done is we've asked our ESF leads to inventory services that they could provide in the way of assistance to the Front Range. They're to have that list into us by Thursday. Everything will then go into a system called Web EOC. It's a state resource management system. We've got our resources listed in there. When they're requested by one of the 20 counties impacted, the state would call us. I'll be the point of coordination for deployment. So our team or whomever or whatever our resources would go. We know about it, it's documented, and we also know when they demob, when they're back here, and we close the loop, so we're tracking our resources. Our goal is to provide support to the Front Range and not impact service provided to Pickens County. Alex is our plans section chief, and maybe you might want to jump in.
No, I think you did a great job. I think one of the aspects that we want to reinforce here is that we're trying to provide structure for what services we can provide to the affected communities, and do that so that we know who from our community is down there providing assistance, so that they're covered for injury, illness, or anything that might happen, and also for payment as well for their time. So we're doing that by standing up the ESF, the emergency support functions, and also creating an incident management team like we do for other events, just to document that process as well.
And the number one rule and the number one thing we don't want, and we're stressing, is we don't want anyone to self-deploy, no freelancing, or as they call it down there, rogue. If anything happens, who owns them? So we really needed to get a handle on this quickly.
So, bringing it back to the county, and this is where I think this is an opportunity to do a check-in. Obviously, this would be better if we had a couple weeks to prepare and whatnot. We're bringing this kind of discussion to you as we've been getting it very quickly. But from the county's perspective, we'll have the information, we'll be tracking, we're going to be tracking costs. If there's an opportunity for reimbursement, we obviously will be in line for it through FEMA or the counties that we're assisting. Right now, though, my assumption is that whatever resources we're sending over are sunk costs. We're owning the costs for those folks at this point. There may be opportunities for reimbursement, as we've said, and we're certainly doing everything to be in line for those. But I'm not assuming that they're going to come back our way. So that's, I think, one decision point for the board, whether you support us moving forward in this fashion and kind of the goals that we've laid out for response. And I suspect we may need, in our smaller departments, we may need to come back to you for, additional appropriations, depending on what it looks like with overtime and costs associated with the response. So, throw it back out to you guys.
It's really, I applaud you guys for jumping in there as quick as you did and making yourself available. It's kind of like Moses to the Pharaoh, here are the 7 plagues. And so Colorado's going through drought, to fire, to who would have ever guessed, flooding. Just unbelievable.
Frogs are next.
Yeah, right. Frogs and insects. But it's such a remarkable, unusual state to have so much of Colorado underwater. And I think, I'm really proud that staff and you guys have stepped up to the plate and offered assistance. And I like Rachel's suggestion that she emailed through all of us that we should look at using a good chunk of our contingency fund to help offset the cost for our staff in terms of travel, time, and lodging and things like that. And I guess I would just ask that, I'm supporting this, but we should just monitor it closely as we move on from week to week and month to month, and make sure that we're not cutting ourselves short in terms of our own needs as well. And we could certainly get our staff back quickly if we need them. Maybe not as quickly for our equipment if we have to deal with mudslides and things like that. So as long as we're all cognizant of that and making sure that we're covered to the extent that we really feel that minimum that we need, I support us helping out. And I know that especially our Health and Human Services Department, we work so closely with our neighboring counties, Eagle and Garfield, that hopefully that there's some sort of communication synergy that they can support our efforts as well.
I think as we get our incident stood up and organized, we can reach out to our neighboring counties and see if they either have similar efforts or, maybe we help coordinate them also.
Yeah. Steve?
I look on this partly as on-the-job training. What an opportunity for our emergency operations people to have first-hand experience helping, on an emergency somewhere else. And that will just make us better prepared for anything that comes our way, whether it be a flood or whatever. And I support the expenditure of people's time and our resources to help the other counties out. I hope we never need to have them come and help us. That we don't have that kind of an emergency here. But who would have ever thought that they would have had that? right now, so.
Rachel?
Yeah, well, thank you all for your efforts, and I know you're representing many others who already are concerned. I guess I'm just going to put up a few concerns that I'm sure you're managing for anyhow, John. But the insurance and liability of our individuals, because there can be some real dangerous circumstances that people are going to be operating under. And, you know, there's now a lot of reports of oil and gas fracking, condensate tanks and things like that. And there could be compromised pipelines. There could be explosions during this cleanup. There could be roads falling away from the graders. And I want to make sure that we're really covered for the individuals, and that I'm assuming that someone has to agree to deploy and want to. It's not that if someone said, no, I can't do this, we don't make anyone deploy to go assist in the mutual aid.
Well, that's part of our discussion in identifying the resources, and part of this is directed, but I think in identifying the resources and such, we're taking those circumstances into account.
Yeah, if you had kids in school and who's going to be with the kids, or you know, issues like that. And then I really was curious, is the housing more people setting up in individual homes? Because I'd imagine all the hotels that are still operable are pretty much filling up with the place residents who can.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen, and what we're anticipating is, right now we've been able to find hotels actually for the folks that are going over. What I would anticipate, this is obviously going to take months and years to recover from, and as the colder weather sets in, I think those hotel rooms are going to disappear very, very quickly. And so one of the advantages of coordinating this way and coordinating through state EOC is that's part of the logistics issue that they help us manage, that until we got into this mode, we were managing for ourselves.
Right.
Regarding the insurance, we do have liability that's going with our people, and that's part of what we're doing when we send our people into these situations, is we are owning part of that risk, and you need to know that as a board. But one of the discussions that we had today, and one of the advantages of this structure, is ensuring the proper briefing, equipment, training, and kind of the safety first mentality before we send folks over. And then on the financial side, we do, you know, we've got our policies and such in place to cover ourselves should there be an unfortunate event with the equipment, or, you know, God forbid, a person. But we're certainly considering those things, and risk management is one of the primary goals in standing up the IC. In regards to how we manage our resources too, one of the, I think, most exciting discussions this morning was as we were talking with BOCC, for example, and municipalities, is we're kind of viewing it as how do we move resources around to cover what we need to cover at home and there. And so it may be that they've got a resource that can go, and we have a resource that has to stay, but maybe our resource is also covering part of the salt's work at that point. And so we talked about, you know, this, we're all thrown into the same pool together now, and how do we make that work? And so those are the discussions we're trying to have between now and Thursday at 3 o'clock, I think, was our hard deadline for everyone to get our initial list of resources put together to share with the state.
Okay, one last follow-up and then comment. I want to make sure that we are in particularly not losing the coverage and the professionalism on the child welfare issues, because, you know, I don't want any kid to fall through the crack here because we're assisting there. And that's just a general comment. You don't have to respond, but that is such a challenging area already for our human service workers, and I understand the magnitude of what they're going to be dealing with down there. So we have to be careful not to burn our own people out, and then make sure that we don't have any children or adults who need adult protective services who didn't get checked in on in a timely fashion because we're living somewhere else. So, you know, that's all I would say there. And then the other is that the work that you're doing, and you and all your staffs and everyone, really make me proud of Pitkin County. And this is a mind-boggling event in its magnitude. Traditionally you might see one canyon or another have the torrential rains, but not the whole sweep from Manitou Springs all the way to the Wyoming border. And I think that it's fair to anticipate that to the extent there's excess funds at the state this year, it's all going to go that way. You're not going to see big bumps and increases in the school budget or senior tax exemptions or anything, because they're going to be putting it all towards there or towards the CDOT budget and whatever recovery, and it may be that way for years to come, but thank you all for the skill sets you've developed and then the ability to offer them.
Michael? Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you. And I just want to be able to say that Pickton County did its part, and in the end, that's all I want to be able to say. So, and I want to say that proudly. This is a terrible situation.
So Georgette,
I just wanted to
What's the good news?
It's sunny outside.
Well, this is
it's not our event.
Yeah, that's true. And this is good news as well, just in people I'm coordinating with regionally and particularly at the state. I've been forwarding emails to them from our county manager and from our ESF leads and how we're mobilizing our resources on our end and making them available to them to assist in any way that we can. They think we're great. So, and that's how the emergency management world works. And every place I've been, they said, when you need us, we'll be there. So it goes both ways. And to your point, it's an amazing training opportunity for our staff. I hope every ESF lead goes there and sits in a chair.
So right now we're organizing for response and to assist with response. There's going to be a whole nother phase to this of recovery. And what's happened in other states that have had major events, whether it be Joplin, Missouri, or New York or Louisiana, they tend to create an umbrella structure like a one New York or one Louisiana. I would anticipate that we're going to see a similar kind of umbrella project come where it's a fundraising tool both for private and public dollars, and what those efforts have done is made a request on a per capita basis, typically for municipalities or counties to try and dedicate some funding out of their general funds to help with relief and recovery efforts. They have not talked about that yet. I just want to kind of put a bug in everyone's ears that I think we're going to see those types of requests coming forward on the recovery side, and we should be thinking about that going forward. And we're going to see ongoing requests for support on the recovery side, whether it be engineering and project management expertise, or inspection for septics and building inspection. All of these are going to kind of be ongoing demands. We're targeting a 3-month window, and then we're going to reassess where's everyone at, and we'll have another discussion like this one about what's the tolerance of our organization and community and desire to continue supporting in the recovery. So that'll be a future discussion, but I think it's something we could start thinking about now.
Okay, thank you so much for all your efforts in this.
We'll have to see the outcome of the succession votes in November.
Rachel's waiting for that. Big thank you for.
Thanks, guys.
No, I'm just waiting to see if they still want to leave the state after November.
Are we allowed to send aid to foreign countries?
Only if we have a mutual aid agreement. Different states.
I think that's all I had for open discussion.
Anybody here have anything for open discussion? Seeing none, we're due over at City Hall at 4 o'clock, so we have a little bit of a break.
Great.
Thank you, grassroots. We'll see you over at City Hall.
Thanks.